All right. Cheers, brother.
Season 1, Episode 1.
It begins. So I showed the guys in the band the theme song.
Yeah.
We've been demoing other things, and they got a kick out of it because it's very much a Mondo rock kind of offshoot, which in and of itself was like a whole lot of love. How many more? It's the same notes as those songs. So like that was kind of the idea when I started that. So did you, when I said that there was going to be a theme song, did you in your head have an idea what it was going to sound like before you hit play, or was there any time to kind of register that?
No, I actually did. It's weird because when you sent that, this could go deep right now. So I have to give a description of this because it was the moment, which was so hilarious. So you realize 20 years ago, we had cut a studio version of Lacuna.
Yeah. Which, by the way, for the folks at home, Lacuna was one of the staples of the Made set list. Made, of course, an alternative new metal rock band out of Champaign back in the early 2000s.
And a mutual friend / vocalist of said band happened to be staying at my house that week while his parents were out of town. And about the same time frame of day, you sent me your version cut and mixed of Lacuna with the drums and the
auxiliary percussion.
And I was like dying of excitement and laughter in the moment that I ran in and woke Kenton up and like forced him to listen to it over my Harman Kardon speakers on my
those are good speakers
2001 home Mac. And we just loved it. And so when this came through in 2025, Kenton is sitting in my kitchen at his computer working. And I see that Google Doc come through. And I pressed play and just started going at it. And I'm like, just got a smile on my face. And I'm like, it's weird because you obviously daydream about what an intro song would sound like. And it would encompass the name. But it pretty much encapsulated everything that I would have thought, which is why it was so like thought-provoking and hilarious for me. But Kenton was like, "What is this?" And I was like, "This is the intro to the pod." And he's like, "Damn," because like before he realized what it was, you could tell he was just thumping with it. And
did he just think it was another demo or something, maybe?
Or who knows? I mean, It was just out of the blue. I just started playing a song over my phone. So, but funnily enough, I think it's one of those instances that because of the setting, because of who was here, and because it was so reminiscent to that Lacuna drop years and years ago, it was just too similar in all the right ways. So
yeah, I recorded that thinking that this is going to be a podcast where a lot of the bands we cover will be classic rock, but at the same time, a lot of the ones we've already brainstormed outside of Led Zeppelin, which is an obvious starting point, and we'll get into them plenty in the series, is more 90s bands. And I think the similarity between a lot of the ones that we chose, guitar riff based bands, seem to be the ones that we kind of focused in on early. And it's influenced the bands we've been in. It's influenced my songwriting in the band I'm in now. And, if we were to start this podcast with any band, it was kind of a no-doubter. Like, the old adage of writing is write what you know. And in podcasting, the same could be said. Podcast what you know. And I am like a walking encyclopedia of Zeppelin because it was all-consuming for me, probably from the age of 9, 10 on. So we're talking 30 years. This has been an all-consuming thing for me. So I'm going to get into a second how I discovered them, but I'm actually curious. I don't know if we've ever talked about how you got into Zeppelin, because I know that you had, and many of our friends had more modern taste back in middle school and high school. You guys influenced me. Like Incubus, good band. I had no idea if I wouldn't have met you guys that they were actually pretty damn good, among others. But I don't know. What was your kind of gateway to it?
Well, I'm glad we got to this so early because this is something that I've been in preparation for this podcast and the launch of this with you, and something you and I do on every road trip to almost every live music event we've ever been to together is pretty much similar to what we're about to get into, right? Just healthy banter and storytelling about where, what, and why a song is meaningful or a band is meaningful. This has meant something to me. I want to share it with you, vice versa. So to get all the way back, historically for me, it was both my introduction to Zeppelin and sort of my introduction into music. As an only child, going on, endless road trips with two parents, a game that we would often play that now has just become an overall staple for my kids and my wife, which it does drive my wife up the wall because she finds it unfair that I do this to her.
Well, you have that institutional knowledge of a
And
lot
she
of
would
it. Yeah.
never, she would never get this in way of how I got it as a kid. But we would be in the car, I'd be in the back seat, a tune would come on, like the first 10 seconds of Bob Seger, turn the page. My dad would turn the radio music all the way down to zero, and he'd say, "Who is it?" And I would say, in the early stages, like, I don't know, but then it became like okay, I need to get this. Like, I have to start integrating this. So not only did I start to answer correctly, if my uncle or dad's friends or parents were in the car, a song would start and I would answer so quickly that my dad then did not have to turn the volume down. And I can distinctly remember the first time I heard Zeppelin was driving to downtown, sorry, not downtown Champaign, Hessel Park for this outdoor shell gig they used to do in the summer times.
Yeah, with the stage mobile.
Stage
They still
mobile.
do.
My Aunt Dina played with a band there, and she's now still on the Grand Ole Opry. But
Damn.
I remember hearing this band that Kenton, again, bring up Kenton a lot probably in this podcast, but his dad, Don, would bring me down in their basement. He had a little studio, couple guitars, drums, things of that nature. And he would play things like Pink Floyd, Zeppelin, And I remember him playing Houses of the Holy for me in the basement.
Album or the track?
The track.
Okay, which is a great riff and an easy riff, right? It's like very instantly. Oh, I can dig that.
I just remember how consumed I was in trying to figure out, although it was simple, what was happening. It was just one of those moments, I think, as like a kid, you'll never forget when something captures you, whether it's music or love or, theme park, a movie, like you're gonna remember that moment. And I remember then walking away from that situation. It was not a unique thing to be over at Don and Ken's house.
Yeah.
And get introduced to something that was monumentally mind-blowing. What was crazy was then translating that over to being with my parents and then hearing yet another song from the same band. And I just knew right away, this is that same band that Don showed me. And so Dad's just about to turn the music down and I'm like, Led Zeppelin. And he's like, I didn't know you knew Zeppelin. I'm like, yeah. And so late that afternoon, we get home and go to his record collection and he pulls out 2 or 3 Zeppelin albums. We start to kind of go through the catalog a little bit. And I'll kind of wrap up my point here. I think what listeners will find as we journey through this podcast and get through miniseries, this is going to be the kind of essence of all bands that we cover, Mike, is that I come from a very, very spiritual side of the music. You'll see that I am embarrassingly and admittingly enough, I know like 0 lyrics to a ton of songs. I hear what I think they are. I pay 0 attention to them. So the deep-seated meaning of like Crosby, Stills, and Nash, Ohio, it was in the last couple months, I learned what event took place at
No
Kent State.
shit. All this time.
Right. I
Wow.
took it as a song that to me meant summertime and happiness and
Wow.
not this powerful political song that took Neil Young an hour to write in the woods and then they cut it, right? I had no idea about the backstory of it. I hear a song and it pretty much sticks with me for whatever moment I was in. And I'll look back if it's a sunny day and the windows are down and I'm listening to that, that's what comes to light. So that Zeppelin song for me, that moment with both Don Elmore and my dad, and then sort of throughout time has stuck with me. And it was very easy for me back then, the whole argument of Zeppelin and the Who, and I'm sure that we'll cover this along the way too. It was never really a question because the riffs, the drums, the writing, just the way that I was captured by their music hit me right where I needed it. And I didn't really do a ton of back end research on bands as a kid. So unlike what I'm sure listeners will find out about you, is that I was okay with the base level joy that Zeppelin brought me. And I didn't go much beyond that until I was much older. And I started to really dig into the composition and who produced this, who paid for it, how did they come up with this, where was it written, where did they record it, things like that. So it started early for me, but it started at a point where I was just hungry to hear riffs and be moved by the power. And ultimately, it's no secret that Zeppelin brings both of those things in spades. So that's kind of what brought me to the lifelong love of where we're at today. So
For me, this started with Led Zeppelin. I mean, literally, my earliest musical memories are twofold. One is Led Zeppelin, one's U2, and maybe we'll do U2 down the road. It's a little bit more expansive of a discography with a few clunkers, to put it kindly, but I still love them. With Led Zeppelin, I was probably, this is one of those things that you can't quite tell if you personally remember it yourself or if it becomes a memory because of everything that other people tell you. Sort of
sure.
like an early trip to Disney World. Well, we had camcorder footage of that trip. Do I remember it in person, or do I remember it via the tapes that I watched when I was a few years older? But whatever it was, when I was 3, 4 years old on the record player, there were two albums that we'd play a lot. They would be U2, The Joshua Tree, which was all the rage back in the late 80s and early 90s, and then it was Led Zeppelin 3. At this point, I don't know what Stairway to Heaven is. I don't know any of that. I just know Immigrant Song. And it was short and it was easily digestible, but it also scared the shit out of me. But there was something very magnetic about it. I always wanted to listen to it. And I guess what I would do is take a yellow ruler and I'd bang it on the back of the couch in rhythm with John Bonham. Now, fast forward to, boy, my sister was on the Urbana High School girls soccer team, and they always did an end of the year banquet like these high school athletic teams do. And it was in the basement of this church in Urbana. And my dad got there a few minutes after my mom and I got there. And he just says, we're sitting down, yeah, Stairway to Heaven was on the radio. Now, it occurred to me that I had not heard, at least consciously heard Stairway to Heaven before this. I knew Immigrant Song. I didn't know much Zeppelin other than that. And it's one of those titles that's sort of like 2001: A Space Odyssey. When you're young, you hear it thrown about in pop culture references, but the name itself has a heaviness or a weight to it, even if you've never watched 2001 or even if you haven't listened to Stairway to Heaven. So he's talking about it like, oh yeah, it's like this, 12-minute song. I mean, he's kind of embellishing it a little bit, but it sounded epic. If I didn't even know what the word meant, it sounded just like that. So the next day, we're driving up to Paxton to see my dad's my grandpa, get just hamburgers, still up there in Paxton, unbelievable. And we stop at Circuit City, which was our go-to place, not Best Buy. It was Circuit City.
Yeah.
They had some nuggets in their CD section, but we didn't even have a CD player in his 1994 Ford Explorer. We had a cassette player. So what we got was whatever Led Zeppelin album lists Stairway to Heaven, get that cassette. So we walked out of Circuit City with 2 cassettes that day. Led Zeppelin 4, which was not Led Zeppelin 4, it's the Zoso, it's the 4 Symbols, right? And In Through the Outdoor, because my dad remembered he really liked that one song on the radio, Fool in the Rain. So that's what we did. We're driving up to Paxton, fast forward, past Black Dog, past Rock and Roll, past the Battle of Evermore, don't even get to Misty Mountain, hop on side B, Stairway to Heaven. And I'm intrigued, but it's a lot to digest. That's an 8-minute song, very dynamic. I knew by the end of it, oh, wow, now it's picking up. We're waiting for hamburgers. My dad and grandpa are in just hamburgers. I say, hey, can I stay in the car? And I purposely did that to listen to it again. And that was it. It was the second listen through in Paxton just before I got my greasy hamburger and fries. And that was a eureka moment that really spun into this lifelong obsession, not just with Led Zeppelin, but with music in general. So now I'm buying Led Zeppelin books. Now I'm getting all the albums. But this album we're going to talk about today, Led Zeppelin 1, was not the first, second, third, fourth, maybe the fifth, sixth that I got in the Led Zeppelin catalog before I finally got around to this one. And without listening to it chronologically early on, I don't know if I appreciated it maybe as much as I do now, given the historical context and how there was nothing like this. There was nothing like this.
Mike, and I don't think you, I, or the majority of listeners that would be around our age demographic would have been on a much different journey than that. Because starting from Zeppelin I chronologically and weaving your way through, as much as I would have loved to experience that like our dads did.
Could you
or
imagine?
beyond.
I want to pick up the new Zeppelin album. Like, what the?
Right.
Oh, the first thing you put on is A Whole Lot of Love. And what
Exactly.
the hell is this?
Again, in preparation for this journey that we're on right now, I tried my best to put myself in shoes of, hey, I'm at the record store. I see this album that caught my eye. I'm grabbing it and I'm getting home, going to my bedroom, shutting the door, and I'm slapping down side A on my vinyl player and I'm rolling with it, just like our dads would have done if, they had an extra, what, $14 back then, $4, whatever.
Oh, hell, like, yeah, $4, maybe $5.
So, the other half here is obviously, I think from the pseudo extreme Zeppelin fan like yourself, I hope that we don't step on toes in terms of some of the lack of information or overexertion of some side stories and information here. But I think the cool thing that we're going to find is that, again, I'm coming from it from these riffs affected me. I love the story. You can go as deep as you want into Zeppelin, right? And more. I don't think anybody could ever touch the depths of what you'll find. Just like we would with Dave or anybody else, right? You can call a song by the guitar the guy pulls off side stage versus, someone like yourself who has a lifelong journey of looking at all the technical aspects of everything and, the producers, the writers, everybody that had a hand in just about everything. So throughout this journey, I'm looking forward to that. And I think with that, we pop into it. What do you say?
Yeah, let's do it. So we're talking today about Led Zeppelin's seminal debut album. But before we do that, my God, we're 15 minutes in. We haven't even said who we are, what our name is.
Hey.
So I guess I should probably get the script for this because this is the first go round, and we're just kind of rolling with things. Welcome to Drop the Needleheads with Schmiggy. That's me. And Yahtzee.
That's me.
Now, here's the thing, Ben. Like, I don't probably in person call you Yahtzee that much, nor do you call me. Well, you do call me Schmiggy sometimes.
Yeah.
More in text conversation, perhaps. So, listen, Mike equals Schmiggy. That's me. Ben equals Yahtzee. That's Ben over there. Drop the Needleheads where the records spin, the bourbon flows, and the breakdowns are deeper, in this miniseries at least, than John Bonham's bass drum. Basically known as the biggest bass drum in classic rock history, about a 24-inch massive thing. 22 is common now. That's the one that I have. 24, I think, was the size of his. This is the start of our miniseries on Led Zeppelin. We're dubbing it The Pod Remains the Cast. This is our homage, if you will, to a podcast that someone inspired us to do this in a music format. That podcast is Blank Check. It is a movie podcast that picks a director and goes from their first film to their most recent or last film. What we're going to do here on Drop the Needleheads is start with an artist's first album, their debut album, and work all the way up to their last or most recent album, whether they're active or not. And we are starting today with the seminal self-titled debut album from Led Zeppelin. January 12th, 1969 was unleashed on the world. Where are we starting, Ben? How should we start this conversation about this album?
Yeah, so obviously a helpful kickoff there. I think the feeling is everything, right? Music, movies, it brings people someplace and it moves them and it gives them an escape, good or bad, right? I would love to get a background and a history and maybe start with when and how the album was made. Any recording stories, band lineups, studio trivia, which I know this is where you shine, Mike, and sort of move on from there. I think that'll give us a healthy foundation for where we'll go next, which is a track-by-track breakdown, which I know will be a fun one.
Alrighty. So. And here's the thing. Later on in the podcast, what we're going to do is somewhat of an awards section. We'll call it awards, categories, whatever you want to. We will rank these tracks from what we consider worst or least, however you want to phrase it, all the way to what we consider the best track. We got some nomenclature that we'll use for that as well. Before we get into the background and the recording process, and this will kind of include how Led Zeppelin was formed, which I thought was very well portrayed in the recent documentary Becoming Led Zeppelin, which I know both you and I absolutely adored. And we'll probably talk a little bit about that because it fits right in. The first time that you heard Led Zeppelin 1, Ben, I want to ask you that in a second. I'll just let you know that for me, fifth or sixth Led Zeppelin album I probably got. I think if I were to go in order of the Led Zeppelin I consumed, it was Led Zeppelin 3 from a very young age, mostly Immigrant Song. I know a few songs after that I would maybe keep the vinyl going, and those kind of freaked me out because that's a trippy record. I cannot wait to do Led Zeppelin 3. Led Zeppelin 4 came next. In Through the Outdoor came after that, which is very uneven, but it's got its gems. And then Led Zeppelin 2, because it has so many classic rock staples. So on 105.9 WGKC, that they would play Whole Lotta Love, Ramble On, Heartbreaker, into Livin' Lovin' Maid. That's 4. Then I got Houses of the Holy, because Over the Hills and Far Away, I heard once on VH1 Legends. Do you remember that show?
Oh, yeah.
There was behind the music, which was more the, scandalous details of Motley Crue or Ted Nugent. And then Legends was the more stately show about Led Zeppelin, the Beatles, the Who. Finally, I think I got around to Led Zeppelin 1, maybe about the same time as Physical Graffiti. Neither album grabbed me right away the way that others might have. For you, though, was it an immediate reaction upon listening to this album like, God damn, I get it? Or is it a slow burn as you first really delved into it? Well, how much did you know about the album before you really kind of did a track by? I mean, you knew probably individual tracks. I know, Babe, I'm Gonna Leave You. You always cited that.
Yeah. So, man, again, it's a great question, because for me, much like almost every band, you catch them after their quote unquote career mostly, or during it, and you get like greatest hits. You get, the froth at the top, and you work your way through. I started with Led Zeppelin 5, 4, which I have 2 copies of. I showed you that were my dad's. Rock and roll, obviously Stairway to Heaven, but Going to California for me was that was the very first. I think that was the one that hit home when my dad and I went back after that Hessel Park series and listened to that like immediately. So it's what stuck anyway. Top to bottom for Led Zeppelin 1, to be perfectly honest, man, I don't think that I ever went top to bottom, track 1 to track 9, at least not as many times as I have in the past few weeks, but definitely not once all the way through. I hop around.
Yeah.
It's the beauty of the world we live in now with Spotify and Apple Music, but top to bottom. And of course, the heavy hitters. Dazed and Confused as a bass player for me is sort of what grabbed me from this album, and it was one that stuck long before I went top to bottom. So I think that's kind of what resonated, and also peculiar, man, because as you get through the journey of this album, you realize it's a little bit different than what you would imagine if you were put on the spot to say, what do you think Led Zeppelin 1 would be like? It's
side B. Side B is weird. And I say that lovingly, because I think this was an album that was very much the result of, let's call Jimmy Page what he is, especially what he was then. He was a virtuoso. This is a guy that had been honing his chops in the 1960s as a session player. He works his way into the Yardbirds. At the same time, Eric Clapton leaves, and Jeff Beck is kind of on his way out. So imagine a lineup where you have Jimmy Page electing to play bass at first for the Yardbirds, just to be in a band. And then they say, well, it's probably a good idea if we got these two guys in the same band. Maybe we should have them each play guitar. That happened for a very short time, maybe not even a calendar year. Jeff Beck leaves. He's kind of a weird guy. Amazing guitarist. Is he still alive? I think he is. He passed away recently? I think he's still kicking. As you're checking that, so Jeff Beck leaves the band. Now Jimmy Page becomes the creative force of the Yardbirds. This is after For Your Love. They're one top 40 hit in America, but they're kind of a staple at theaters and things like that. If they come to America, they're playing the Fillmore East and the Fillmore West. They are a band with some cachet. Jeff Beck update, do we know?
Yeah. Passed away in East Sussex.
That's
January 10th, 2023.
Just a couple years ago. So he was probably what, like late 70s, 80s, something like that.
Yeah.
Okay. I vaguely remember that news. It's what's kind of sad about that.
8 years old, so he was a little older than I would have imagined.
That it just occurred to me, we're going to have more moments like that in the next 5-10 years, where we name an artist that we grew up listening to that your dad would have quizzed you on in the car, and we're like, whoa, didn't he die or not? Like, we're going to have those. So anyways, now the Yardbirds are a Jimmy Page-dominated band, and he's starting to become the creative force from it. But the other guys in the Yardbirds, they're done. They've had enough. They've been touring for 6-7 years through 3 different lead guitarists, And in the summer of 1968, they basically tell Jimmy, hey, appreciate it, man. We're out. Yep. Jimmy's like, okay, well, I have a name. I have the Yardbirds' name. We have this contractual obligation to play some dates in the fall in Scandinavia.
Yep.
I need a band. Well, he calls up Jonesy, John Paul Jones, who I want to try in this miniseries to give him the love he deserves.
I'm so glad that you are looking to give him flowers. Obviously, I am a bass player, so by trait and trade, that's where I go. However, this gentleman specifically, anybody listening to this podcast, or not for that matter, should research his journey pre-Zeppelin and his journey throughout Zeppelin and after. The guy was as decorated of a musician as you could almost get, with almost the coolest backstory of all of them. And it was a theme amongst the great documentary that's out now and available to everybody, that he was just like the coolest cat to be around as well. And the demeanor that you see on him in almost every video that you can dig up is exactly what you get, right? Face value, it's the man, the myth, the legend, JPJ. And it's sometimes hard for the average listener to understand how much he's all over these albums. So we'll get to that.
Well, we'll get to him. And the reason why his backstory is so interesting is he grew up in a musical family. His dad was a musician himself, a professional musician. His mom, I think, was like a singer on the, British equivalent of Broadway. So she was a performer herself. He, at age 14 or 15, became the lead organist at this Catholic church. And what cool part of the documentary, he talked about the father that was there. He's like, he was a pretty cool guy, pretty cool father. And you're right, John Paul Jones, you talked about his personality, too. I mean, this was a guy that was in Them Crooked Vultures with Dave Grohl and drug-addled Josh Homme. And he was, if you watch interviews of those guys in 2010, he's just straight chilling. He's got this wry sense of humor. He's seen it all. So him seeing Josh Homme go off on a binge of amphetamines and God knows what else, he's numb to that. As long as the concert's good, which it always was at Them Crooked Vultures, then he's fine. So John Paul Jones, okay, that's an easy guy to ring up. But what Jimmy Page was looking for was, the term was supergroup back then. He was trying to get a vocalist named Terry Reid, who I guess had some name recognition over in England and a powerful voice. Terry Reid had a good thing going solo, so he was like, thanks, no thanks. Fine. And then he gets word about this young singer, 19 years old, from the Midlands, which is basically the countryside of England, about an hour and a half away from London, Robert Plant. And he goes to see him, and he sees him play with this band named Hobstweedle, which was a very sort of pixie hippie band. And he sees him perform, and he's blown away. And the first thing he asks himself, or maybe not ask himself, but makes an observation, this guy must be a real asshole if no one has picked him up already. Because the voice was so good, and here he is playing in this obscure village in a band called Hobstweedle. But they get along famously. One more guy, you got to get the drummer. Who do they get? Robert Plant's old chum from the Midlands, John Bonham, who it took a little bit of convincing. How much? Not exactly sure. I think that's a little bit embellished. Now you have your four-man lineup. To me, Ben, what's so crazy, and we always talked about this when we were younger, the idea of, we didn't have delusions of grandeur with our bands that we played in, but it always seemed, especially when you look at Led Zeppelin's backstory, for Robert Plant and John Bonham, they essentially lived the Mark Wahlberg rock star sort of thing. They're just these young guys from way in the middle of nowhere, recruited by two legendary session musicians to be in a band that, worst case, will be mildly successful. Yeah,
and it's the dream, right? It's what Dave Grohl talks about often, where you want to be that kid in the audience, which, Mike, we will definitely get to this at some point, but you want to be that guy in the audience where you say, hey, our drummer just got deathly sick backstage. Does anybody know our tunes? And up your hand goes, next on stage with the fucking Foo Fighters. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge. But nonetheless, dude, he recruited these guys. However, it wasn't just a blind recruitment of like, we'll get you guys up to speed with where we want to be. They got together, and it was like a strike of lightning, right? I mean, and they all admit to that. The journey to get there, and it's going to be difficult here because we're doing an entire miniseries, so we have plenty of time to get through a lot with their personal side and the journey. So I don't want to, blow it all right here. during Led Zeppelin I, but a lot of riff between.
So it was, okay, Pat Bonham, I mean, Robert joked about this, and whether he's just kind of being self-deprecating or if it was actually true, when he approached John to be in the band, Pat was basically dissuading him from doing that because she thought Robert was a bad influence. I mean, Robert talked, he was basically homeless.
Yep.
And he was a struggling musician. His dad wanted him to be an accountant and a respectable businessman. Mick Jagger, he wasn't. What I mean by that is Mick Jagger grew up in an upper middle class family. So even if the band thing didn't work out, Mick Jagger had already experienced at the London School of Economics or something. He would have been fine. Robert Plant was basically, it kind of cracks me up because he looks like our buddy Asher, who is a busking street performer in New Orleans who is living the dream, man. Like, he has found his niche down there, and he has that long mane that Robert does. And I'm thinking to myself, like, let's say all of a sudden people stop going to the French Quarter and Asher's Thursday, Friday, Saturday jam sessions where he is playing for 8 hours and making good money playing music. Let's say all of a sudden people just stop going to New Orleans. And now Asher's like, well, shit, what am I going to do? So here's Robert Plant back in 1969. What am I going to do? He had a record deal with CBS Records from 1967, a couple of very overwrought kind of white man soul records that didn't go anywhere. So now you got your four guys, and you mentioned it. They talk about that lightning striking. The first song they ever played was, do you know that trivia?
Oh, man.
Later covered by Aerosmith in a pretty cool arrangement that they did with it. It was a Yardbirds song, I think, wasn't it? Yeah, it was. It was a Yardbirds song.
Now I'm drawing a blank here.
The train kept a rollin', which Led Zeppelin, you can find online. There's live versions of it from the 69 tour, and they have some soundboard recordings, too, from the Fillmore and other places. So they play that, and that's the old legend. They go in there, hey, here's Train Kept a Rollin', it's a 12-bar blues. All right, here's the key, and they just bash into it, and it's magic, right? So that is August, September of 1969. By September 25th, 1969, they go into the studio, and they recorded their album in a grand total of 36 hours. That includes the mixing and overdubs, all of it.
Unbelievable.
This is a good sounding album.
Yeah.
It still sounds good on headphones, in your car.
So 12-bar blues, right? As you maneuver through this album, there are songs that have stood the test of time. They all really do. I mean, you visit each one individually, know who you're listening to. They are the legend of Led Zeppelin now. Again, what I'm trying to remain in the shoes of is listening to this as if it were my first time and giving each track its fair due on a first listen, so to speak. There is a ton of blues backing this album almost the entire time in different ways. So Train Kept a Rollin' is an interesting sediment, I think, and a setup to the direction that they ended up heading in a lot of these songs, right? In different variations. You get a lot of it. If it's isolated, it's a lot of heavy blues. It is, and lyrically, I mean, really get
it's all blues.
On the lyrics, it's all just a testament to what you also hit on, which was Robert's journey. And I think, the level of writing that both him and Jimmy paired up on was sort of a soulful, but like, let's not overcomplicate it. We need to fill space, which I know you and I know a hell of a lot about, is musically, I don't think they ever had a question if they were going to be good or not. It's what they could fill the space with vocally. Was that going to resonate? And I think as time went on, they obviously got stronger and stronger from the lyrical standpoint, which we will also get to. But overall reception was hit a note there whenever you talked about the blues, because I think for me anyway, track by track in the writing style seemed very bluesy to lead things.
I want to add something here to the awards section, or the category section that we're going to do later, which is hot take. We're going to start with just calling this thing hot take, because I have a hot take about this album that is going to sound like a slight, but it's actually not. So I got that listed here as something we'll talk about. Okay, so they go into Olympic Studios in London, which unfortunately Olympic Studios no longer active. We're going to London, my wife and I, here in a bit, and I was like, well, if I could see what are places that I would like to see, and that was when I listed. Nope, no longer active. Regardless, they go in there in September 25th, 1969, 36 total hours, many of which were in the overnight hours just simply to save money. So the grand total cost to record, produce, and mix this album, 1,742 pounds, which today would be 37,000 or thereabouts. For U.S. dollars, about 40,000.
And all paid for by
Jimmy Page.
Yeah.
And Peter Grant might have had some of his money in there. So, but yeah, this was self-financed with no record company.
Time back then was without a question money. So any of these folks that were spending overnight hours and time with the band that weren't directly for the effort definitely spent their money through time, if nothing else. But Peter Grant will definitely enter this conversation later as well.
Well, Peter Grant, and we'll get to that because they're going to have a product, and now they can sell it, and it's done. Right. And this is where Jimmy's decade worth of studio experience really shone through. He had seen all these things done before. Now, there was let's call him the engineer, but this is where there's a little bit of dispute with it. Glenn Johns was the engineer, at least on the credits for this album, though he was hired initially, according to him, to be the producer. What does the back of the record say? Produced by Jimmy Page. Now, was it his creative vision? Yes. Did he come up with the distant miking techniques for his guitar amps? Yes, which is why when you listen to this on headphones especially, there's a lot of space and there's a lot of natural echo. And there's some, added reverse echo, cool effects, but his guitar bounces off the walls of that studio because the microphones are like 20 meters away from it sometimes, and he's just cranking it.
Yeah, and I mean, there's also speculation, no hard fact, that because every cent was funded for the most part that we know of by Jimmy, and he just sort of said, "I'm
the guy."
The guy. So,
and listen, I mean, Glenn Johns, the engineering, and I'm going to get to this in a second here with him. He was a vital part of this album, but this is Jimmy's vision. I mean, from the track listing to the stylistic choices, the genre hopping from blues to rock to acoustic, even a pop song in there really to start side B, if you think about it. This is Jimmy saying, this is our blueprint. These are all the different tools of our trade. I'm going to get it out in 40 minutes. Okay, Glenn Johns, the credited engineer who still says, well, maybe I should have been named producer. Essentially, it was a handshake deal, and at the end of it, Peter Grant and Jimmy came back and said Jimmy's going to be listed as producer. Glenn Johns came up with this 3-mic drum technique. So if you were to go online as a fledgling recording person for your own home studio or whatever, this is a famous technique, and here's how it works. This is what he did with Zeppelin and John Bonham, who was notoriously difficult to record early on because these guys were so used to just putting the microphones right up to the drums. Well, he knocked the shit out of the drums, so that wasn't going to work. It wasn't going to sound good. What he would do, Glenn Johns, is put one mic directly over the kit, about 40 inches high, looking directly down at the snare. And the second mic was at the 3 o'clock position on the floor tom, the drummer's perspective. So 3 o'clock from the floor tom from the drummer would be the outside of it. About 1 or 2 feet above the rim of the tom, looking across the kit to the hi-hat. And then 40 inches from the snare drum. So this is a 3-mic technique that he would use, and that's how he got the sound. And I'm listening to it today in my car. The separation between the kick and the snare and the toms, and I think that Jimmy must have been actually turning the knobs on the mixer to make some of those tom fills go left to right.
Yep.
However they did it, the drums sound really good. I think the drums out of all the instruments on this album sound the best.
Yeah, we do have a little award ceremony with certain topics. So again, we'll get back to this in due time, but I think for the average listener, especially this day and age too, it's easy to listen to something that was written, produced, and has come out in the past 10 years, right? And it's had Pro Tools. And you can splice one section of 1 minute or less of a song and redo it and splice it in accordingly, and you're never even going to know the difference. You can literally level everything to a T where it's quote-unquote perfection.
Yeah.
To me, there is nothing and there will never be anything quite like a perfect live recording. We did it as a band, Mike, and when that comes out, obviously sometimes you can isolate like one recording, a bass player recording his track, a drummer recording his track, but still live in essence because there's blemishes, there's mistakes. But if you get the sound right, there's a crunch, there's a depth to it that you just don't get from overdoing it electronically. And I think that technique, which I'm learning just now as we talk here, is pretty incredible to know that given the time, given the budget, given everything that they had, these creative guys were together and produced what we now know as that. And that's the point of this, is saying that you listen to that album and now the world that we're in, you think that's easy.
Yeah.
Like, what's behind it? But then if you really think about it, it was astonishing that they got this sound when they did.
That quickly.
That quickly.
That
right.
quickly. And this was mostly track live. I didn't do a great job explaining that. Okay, so mic 1, kick drum in front of it. Okay, no hole in the kick drum, none of that. Mic 1, kick drum a few inches away from it. Mic 2, directly above the kit, 40 inches, looking down at the snare drum. Mic 3, over the floor tom 3 o'clock perspectives. That's 3 mic technique Glyn Johns. Now, Glyn Johns' next project, Let It Be, The Beatles.
Yeah.
He's in that documentary all over it. Okay.
Can I comment quickly too on, you see still frame pictures, black and white sometimes, so on and so forth, of that same scene right there. A Glyn Johns behind the glass, maestroing the boys, right? We look at it as this glamorous moment in time. Like we're looking at the Mona Lisa or something, right? Like some work of art that's just, it's unfathomable to us that moment happened. These sound engineers back then, it wasn't glamorous. They weren't like going out in the streets getting known and recognized and so forth. However, the overall essence of the era of bands and artists was pretty tight knit. You find that most documentaries you watch, there's crossovers everywhere, right? So word of mouth traveled fast back then, and talent traveled fast. And I think him specifically, his work speaks for itself, right, with what he's done throughout his career. But you see those pictures and you see the level of work that they put in. This was just passion, man. This was a hobby that became a job that they ultimately found out how to make some scratch and be around people that they enjoyed. And it was just as much of a creative outlet as we're treating this podcast at right now, right? They weren't going into it hoping that anything happened. They were doing it just because it felt good, right? And I think that you see these pictures, you see those things. Again, it's easy to like put it on a pedestal now because we know it came from it.
For
but
sure, yeah.
There's
no glamour though.
We're doing this right now, and it's gonna, it's just incredible. So I love those pictures, and I love seeing him back there because they're usually in like a button down. It's the middle of the night, like cigarette.
Oh God, ashtray full.
And just one after the next, just getting hours under their belt and getting it done. And you just think about that marathon back then. And again, we get this result. Like you hear a glimpse of what that whole marathon of 36 hours was. It's just crazy whenever you zoom out a little bit and think about what that experience must have been like. And it was zero pressure. Like I can only imagine that there wasn't a ton of pressure around it. I think Jimmy knew what they were doing. I think he had a vision for what was going to come out of it, which you get in the documentary, you get from every interview they had. Like when that lightning struck with Train Come A-Rollin', I think that what came next, what was in the studio, and then what we have here on these first 9 tracks of what we know as Led Zeppelin just seemed to be something they were like, let's go for it. And if something comes from it, it comes from it. If not, these guys were so used to stopping what they were doing and pivoting, right? But
and I think that first rehearsal was probably just confirmation for him, like, oh yeah, we got this. Because in his head, I bet for about a few years, he'd been figuring out, all right, when I first control my own band, our first album's going to kind of look like this. And over time, he would map it out. He probably had an idea about, okay, each side is going to end with this epic rock song, and I want different styles and genres. And then I bet by the time they went to the studio, he even knew what's in the left channel, what's in the right channel. When I record this solo, I want this amount of echo on it. All that sort of stuff, I think, was already kind of in his head, which I think is the sign of a virtuoso. He wasn't... With Jimmy Page... If we were to play the game of if you're starting a band, what guitarist are you picking? I'm picking Jimmy Page not because he's the best guitarist, because even he would say he's not. He's phenomenal, But Jimmy Page, to me, is the complete package. Songwriter, guitarist, producer, band leader. He was the brains behind this operation, never more so than on this album. So, Led Zeppelin knocks this album out 36 hours. They take the tapes over to America. I mean, they shopped it around a little bit, and at first there wasn't a whole lot of interest in signing them at the rate that they probably wanted to, because Peter Grant was a very astute businessman, and he said, this is something of value, and we are not going to just sell it for cheap. For some reason, Atlantic Records really, really wanted this band. Jerry Wexler was the guy over there, Ahmet Ertegun, who they paid tribute to at the 2007 concert. He was the head of Atlantic Records. They fly over to New York. They have this meeting with them. They play them the tapes, and they get this amazing record deal. But more importantly, which was very unusual for the time, Jimmy said, complete artistic control. Yep. Like, Atlantic Records could not meddle with anything Zeppelin put on the record, on the album cover, in the grooves of the vinyl. That was entirely up to Led Zeppelin for their entire career.
Do you think there was anything behind that? I mean, aside from, as JPJ, John Paul Jones refers to it as a mafioso, like,
yes,
that they walked in with, but U.S.-based Atlantic Records, do you think they knew that UK was the place and they couldn't pass up the opportunity to have a band that would ultimately become what they were?
I mean, think
what was the essence behind that and being able to pull those strings? Because, again, it was unheard of, but not only was it unheard of, if you take the essence of American labels back then, it was a stonewall. Like, you know, they would easily turn people away that weren't going to abide by that creative ability and what they could drive you to if things weren't going their way. So
Cream was on the way out. That was short-lived. They were hard rock. It's funny. You listen to Cream, and I'm not crapping on them. It just sounds so pallid compared to Led Zeppelin. It just doesn't cook. I love Sunshine of Your Love. That's a great riff. I will always think of Goodfellas when Jimmy Conway decides, I'm going to kill this man.
Some say that song was the birth of metal.
Kind of. The riff, you could certainly argue that.
Zakk Wylde is one of those people who says his love for metal came from that exact song, but I'm with you.
It's proto-Sabbath, really.
To go beyond that, they're milquetoast.
Compared to Zeppelin, at the time, I get it.
In comparison to Zeppelin, but Clapton was far from what would be labeled that, right? So, like, on fire with Clapton, but from the band presence, and I think back then, if you had a group, if you had different personalities, different statures within the band, like, hopefully we get into this too, each secularly of what presence they brought to the masses, but I think there was a sellability. Obviously, we look at movies like Almost Famous, right? There was an essence about each person in a band answers to a portion of fans, right? Like, and everybody can gravitate to somebody in the band. If you had one artist, of course, they're going to be big and we can produce them and write them. But to me, Atlantic, seeing this group come in, man, can you imagine watching these four guys walk in and you get secularly, like, I mean,
well, I think what it was, though, is at the time it was Jimmy. Jimmy had enough name recognition from the Yardbirds, and if you look at early promotional photos, they treated Jimmy Page like Jim Morrison. There's a photo even where Jimmy Page has his hand out, like, you know, he's inviting you into his lair, and the other three guys are behind him, and you got Robert Plant, who's this 19-year-old, you know, rock god with this long mane of blonde hair, and he's sidelined. John Paul Jones, he's just a chum. He's fine, you know. John Bonham is a bearded construction worker, essentially a farmer. So I think what it was, Cream was on the way out. That was pretty well known by this point. And, well, I don't want to say that, but it was known that there was infighting and all of that. The three guys didn't like each other. It was a mercurial relationship with Cream. So Atlantic Records is thinking, all right, we want a hard rock band for FM radio stations. Jimmy Page, Peter Grant going, just them. The other band, they're hanging back in England during all this time. And they sell this record to Atlantic Records, and they say, we don't want to be on Atco, because if you go through your vinyl collection, you're going to find Atco Records. That was the rock subsidiary of Atlantic. Atlantic was the home of Otis Redding. and I think Dusty Springfield, Aretha Franklin. It was like the prestigious R&B Atlantic Records. Rock was not the big thing, but they wanted that label because if you know what it's like when you put out a Led Zeppelin album and you got the red and green Atlantic label, it pops. Yeah. So they had cachet. They get the record deal, complete artistic control, really good cut of the royalties and all that stuff. And now, just like that, about a month and a half after they recorded it, they are Atlantic signed, Led Zeppelin, press release and all, making test copies to send out to FM radio stations, and finally release the thing to the wild on January 12th, 1969. Which is, by the way, a mere 4.5 months, I think, after the first rehearsal.
It's insane. And you teed up two things there, which I'm glad you did, because on my list of needs for this segment, I've got album cover. You just hit on a little bit of it. It's impossible not to notice two things beyond the burning Zeppelin that is clearly in black and white, but the orange Led Zeppelin.
Not orange at first.
Oh, really? Okay.
Turquoise on the original pressings, and then they switched to the orange. The turquoise doesn't look as threatening, so I think they made the right call.
Okay. And then clearly the Atlantic label. So, Mike, any thoughts, background, takeaways from your first experience
listening to the album?
Yeah.
I bought this album from Borders bookstore. Remember Borders? I think it's Benny's now in Champaign. From Borders bookstore, and like I said, it was maybe the
furthest out in town you could possibly get when it
back then,
up.
yeah. So it was a Saturday morning. Again, I was already probably 5-6 Zeppelin albums deep, and oddly enough, one of those is In Through the Outdoor, which no Zeppelin fan would pick as a top Zeppelin album. So by Led Zeppelin I, I knew, oddly enough, I already had BBC Sessions, because that was a live album that came out in 97. That was just as I was really getting into Zeppelin, and BBC Sessions, it was a new Zeppelin thing, live album. Okay, I should probably buy it. And then most of that first CD on it, there's 3 different versions of You Shook Me. And there's, I think, 3 different versions of I Can't Quit You, Babe. And 2 Dazed and Confused. And it's really the first album and some blues jams. It has Travelin' Riverside Blues, which is one of their best grooves. So I knew Dazed and Confused. I knew the blues songs. I knew Communication Breakdown, which there are 3 versions of that on BBC Sessions. So I wasn't blind to Led Zeppelin 1. But nonetheless, when I put the album on, you get Good Times, Bad Times. I don't think Good Times, Bad Times is some masterpiece. I think you probably couldn't do better for an introduction. It is incredible how they're like, here's our opening salvo, and you hear each of the 4 guys doing what they do best, just executing a little 2-minute, 40-second rock song to perfection. So again, it ain't a masterpiece, but as far as an opening salvo, I don't know if you can get better than that.
No, my notes for this podcast, Mike, were how long in now, and my first pen to paper note that I took was, how do you get better than that ? Because this podcast is titled Drop the Needleheads. Had no idea in cultivating this that this was going to be the first album we were going to do, but the first thing you hear is clearly the very subtle but light record. Like it is air.
Lots of air.
Okay, so like everybody knows it, and you play it, and it grabs you. And again, sitting in my room, door closed, Almost Famous style, probably lit a candle, and I'm sitting there, put my studio headphones on so my parents don't know what I'm listening to, and that's what you hear. I mean,
yeah.
Here's the thing, and we'll get to this, but from that moment, as you go track by track, it doesn't matter. And I say that because what you did to me in the first 25 seconds of this album is going to make me wonder what I'd miss if I turned it off. Not saying that anything that follows doesn't follow suit, man, but like they knew track-wise what they were doing in terms of people will turn this record over to side B and they're going to go at the whole thing because of this first 25 seconds where we grab them, right?
Yeah.
For exactly the reason that you just said. All four are involved in capturing everybody that's ever listened to Zeppelin as the first experience with them. And I think also just you hear the name Led Zeppelin. The album cover does justice to what you would expect without much more obviousness than what it is. And the other note that I had, Mike, was cultural background of the time. So I think it always kind of helps to paint a picture of what was going on in the world, obviously, around that time. And didn't do a ton of back end research on this. So I'm kind of leaning on any takeaways from what the boys might have been going through or what around that time frame. But
I think this song, sonically, it's not as if upbeat rock songs or heavy rock songs didn't exist. But I think this is where the production really takes it off. I mean, there's a depth to it. The bass is so much more prominent than most songs at the time. The kick drum is just like, from the outset, you put it on your speaker system now, and the kick drum registers in a subwoofer that a lot of songs in 1969 don't. But I think you mentioned it too. This is the thing that Zeppelin was so freaking good at. You know, even when you don't listen to them on vinyl, the air and the space, if you still feel like you're listening to them on vinyl. And it's in those moments, the rest between the da-na, you know, and you just hear that hi-hat going. I know he puts a tiny bit of delay on it, which he did with Bonham's hi-hat a lot. It just sounds so good. I mean, for an album opener, and you make a good point too. First 25 seconds, you as a listener, you are in. I'm not going to turn this thing off now. I want to see where this thing's going. It's very similar to you go to a good concert. If the opening couple songs are good, you got me for a while. Because I'm feeling it now as a listener, as a spectator. So, great opener. We're going to get later, of course, into the rankings of this album. Track 2, imagine you have this rock assault. It fades out. Now we got this A minor descending acoustic reverbed up the yin-yang ballad, dare we call it? Bluesy ballad. Babe, I'm Gonna Leave You. Listen to it again today. It is long. There were some reviews at the time that said, does it really need to be 6.5 minutes? I don't know. It could have been edited, maybe. But sonically, again, the space, it sounds like he's playing that guitar in a freaking cathedral.
I have felt my entire life like I have been cursed by songs that I love. They grab me just like Good Times, Bad Times. Out on the Tiles is another example.
We'll get to that, Led Zeppelin 3.
Holy cow. I could go on literally forever in the amount of songs that grab me. And by the time I have a moment to breathe, they're over. And it is a essence of a lifelong battle with being so frustrated at these bands like Zeppelin, the Beatles, the Stones, who have given me 2.5 minutes of amazingness and nothing more. So I truly was a little bit relieved whenever you get into a song like Babe, I'm Gonna Leave You, where it's long, but it's an enjoyable long, and at least it's a stretch of the creativity that they've got. And honestly, man, I'm going to say it, the balls to go from Good Times, Bad Times to 6-minute, 41-second Babe, I'm Gonna Leave You on track 2, again, to the point of you've got me, so hey, why don't you take advantage of it? It's pretty obvious.
Take a chance.
2.5 minutes. All right, now you're on to 7 minutes of this. Buckle up, right? And then what are you thinking from there, man? You're like, I have no idea what I just experienced, but a 1-2 punch of pretty much, excuse my language, what the fuck, is where I would be heading after those 2 tracks were over. I mean, and I love it too, man. I of the bluesy ballads, we'll get to our rankings later, but Babe, I'm Gonna Leave You is up there, man. I mean, I've been a fan of that song since the first time I heard it, and to me, it's never been old. So the argument that it's too long, I would counter argue with the fact that some of the greatest songs that have been written are too damn short. So
that's great. I like that a lot because if there's a repetition to it, I don't mind that. I mean, there's a hypnotic quality to it. There are 2 points in that song that really stood out to me and have for a long time. One is before a big blow up. I think the first really where they go electric. Finally, there's this ascending guitar effect that's like you can tell they're building. Oh shit, what's this production thing going on? It's really kind of creepy. And then they break electric finally, maybe 2.5 minutes in. The other one is the very end of the song, where it's like, that's why it's calling me, and then a little Spanish flamenco guitar. And then it resolves in a major chord descending thing really slow. If you look at the last note he sings, there's still 25 seconds left for the band to resolve that thing. And they bring it home, they land that thing perfect. So, yeah, it's, I don't know. I feel like I might be adjusting my rankings on the spot here. I trust me, I have it high. But
it's what it's all about. I've got it high too. I'm so interested when we get to that section of the podcast to dive in. But yeah, it was a movement for me, I guess, say the least, because I listen to it now and I get the same thought-provoking wonder that I had when I first heard it. And also, not that he wasn't unleashed on Good Times, Bad Times, but I think that Robert, it was like, I think Jimmy was like, okay, buddy, here you go. Like, do your thing, right? Like,
yes,
that's
unleashed.
When it's stretch time, and it comes in the first Babe, right? Like, it's like, welcome to the world, Robert Plant, right? Like, it's exactly what it is. So it's like intro to.
Yeah, you're right. No, it is definitely Robert, because the first song is, God, what's the highest note in Good Times, Bad Times? I know what it means to be alone. That's the highest note. You can see, you can sing that along in your car. It's not that high,
right.
But it's when in Babe, I'm Gonna Leave You, he's like, oh God, I can't. You have to go falsetto and a half to get some of these things, and he just. But that's impressive. I think his best vocals on that song are the quiet, baby. Like, oh shit, Robert, what is going on, man? You're 19.
And brings it down, and we got 7 more tracks to get through here, but
listen, not all of these are on this level. It's fair to say.
There's one last thought that I have every time I listen to it, and you've seen That Thing You Do, right?
Oh, of course, the Oneaters.
The Oneaters. So they start subtly in kind of the bar scene, school scene, I guess, in that movie, but they get the chance to hit the bar scene. And to me, when Babe, I'm Gonna Leave You hits that subtle, the band is just, as we refer to it in the bass world, chugging. They're just a host to keeping the music alive for Robert to thrive. I could sense myself sitting at like a circle 2 top, like I'm Henry in Goodfellas with my lady next to me, a cocktail.
At the Copacabana?
Copacabana. For the full entry. And they go to that. And this would be in my real life where I would then be scrambling mentally to say, how do I talk to the band and figure out a way to manage these guys? Because they're going to be famous for the rest of the time. That's the song. Like, historically, yeah, we started at different paces at different albums along their journey. But like, if I'm listening to Zeppelin and I'm listening to them in a small bar or a pub, or I get a hold of this album and I hear that, from that moment on, unless they break up or something crazy happens, like, they're going somewhere, because vocally, instrumentally, and from a composition standpoint, they've got it, and it's a blues ballad, man. Like, it's a 6-minute, 41-second blues ballad that they just took and stuck right as number 2 on Led Zeppelin I. So cojones to go from Good Times, Bad Times to Babe, I'm Gonna Leave You, and just go for it. And again, like I said, if I'm sitting in a little dark bar listening to this thing, it's like, okay, well, what more can you give me, man? Like, this is, I want all of it, and it doesn't matter what shape it comes in, right?
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I mean, I think that song, if we're to pick 2 songs that probably encapsulate the moodiness of Zeppelin on this album, it's that and Dazed and Confused. Those are the moody songs. Those are the, God, this band, like, all the stuff about Jimmy Page loving Aleister Crowley and all that dark magic stuff. Yeah, okay, well, of course, if he's arranging stuff like this, because that's the thing. This is a traditional song. Both him and Robert Plant listened to, I think, a version by either Joni Mitchell or Joan Baez. I always forget who. And then they arranged it, and it was perfectly arranged. It's not a complicated song. I mean, it just starts in A minor, it descends, easy enough. Anyone could play it, but no one's going to execute it like this. So you go from rock to acoustic, balladry, but still rock, to blues. So You Shook Me. I have always been partial to this studio cut. I like it better than the live versions I've heard of it, which can sometimes go 10, 11 minutes, because I think even though it's 6.5 itself, there's a tightness to it. And my favorite part of the song, it's 12-bar blues, nothing fancy, but it is the solo sections, because both the organ, the harmonica, and then finally the guitar solo are all great. It's like they planned it out just enough to be like, here's where each of these solos is really going to hit, and it sounds big. It could have been such a bore of a track. I listened to You Shook Me almost as much as any other track on the album, which when I was younger, maybe not. But as you get older and like the blues, and then you realize, oh, well, this is actually not just some 12-bar blues. This is like musical virtuosity from all 4 band members, and giving them time to breathe and space to each do their thing. I really like this cut, and I like it more the older I get.
Yeah, well, I think it's an example of one of those things like beer or wine. It gets better with time. It's an acquired taste. You Shook Me is one of those for me. Mike, the entire time we're talking here about tracks, I'm staring at my rankings and
think about adjusting.
No, I'm sticking strong. It's just funny because what we're addressing here would probably be a little easier if we just unveiled them, but that would not be fun with the essence of the podcast. You Shook Me is something that I think everybody knows. Everybody can pick up on if you're even half a Zeppelin fan, right? Like, it's a usual track that would be played in their greatest hits repertoire, just because of what you said. I mean, the solo portion and the composition is them at the height of their strength, right? So, but I what it's sandwiched between for me is like, it's so hard because you're on the precipice of Dazed and Confused next, 3 tracks in a row that are over 6 minutes long. So
yeah, in a weird way, this is a breather.
It's now become a marathon, and You Shook Me becomes a breather. Literally, that's what I was about to say. Yeah. So thank you, because I don't think it has the justice of placement in the album. And I'm not going to nitpick Jimmy Page's arrangement of this record, but going from Babe, I'm Going to Leave You to a 6-minute, 28-second You Shook Me to Dazed and Confused, dude, Dazed and Confused hit me like a freight train the first time I ever heard it. And very few songs since have done that. And I listen to a ton of fucking music. It would be hard to go back and be like, I need to give You Shook Me its flowers after you've been mollywopped by Dazed and Confused. So
I feel bad for the song in a way.
Absolutely. Because secularly, by itself, yeah, man, like all day. I'm not going to turn it off the radio. I'm not going to press next on the track if it happens to be on my daily playlist. But if I'm listening to the album straight through, it is a breather. It's a moment where I'm probably checking my phone. I'm checking notes, checking emails, doing something else, not because of the quality of the track or the enjoyment of the track, but just the way it's placed and where it's sandwiched, man. It was a tough one for me to give that much love to, simply because of that.
I thought long and hard about where to put it in my rankings, so we'll get to that here when we get through each track. Dazed and Confused. I mean, listen, I would never proclaim to be someone that, as a Zeppelin fan, views Dazed and Confused the same way that I do maybe When the Levee Breaks or Whole Lotta Love even. I mean, I recognize its import, or let me say, in my fandom, I've always recognized the importance of it, but I've never necessarily thought that's one of my favorite Zeppelin songs. But I don't know if that's so important as it is just acknowledging the fact this is a death dirge of a song. From the opening notes, It is the darkest shit that I could have heard in 1969. I mentioned the Immigrant Song scared me. This song is scary. It's frightening. And to just think about Robert Plant's first lyric and vocal after you already have John Paul Jones' descending funeral march line, and then you got Jimmy Page doing these really kind of creepy wah-wah, harmonic effects on his guitar, and then Robert just blasts in. And then finally, when all four of them go into the main riff together and you got that octave guitar kind of in the background to make it even creepier. And then 6.5 minutes later, they could have done 6.5 minutes technically of that riff, and it would have been like a Sabbath song. And I love Sabbath, and they have songs where they really stretch out dynamically and rhythmically and tempo. They switch things like that, War Pigs being an obvious example. But this one right here, when I listen to it, it is basically a perfectly executed track. It is perfectly played. It sounds spontaneous, but they rehearsed the heck out of it. And they got an ace take of an ace song.
Hard to follow that up because I echo it exactly. I want to start with what you said in the beginning, which was Death Dirge. So as a kid, sonically and powerfully, when a song hits you, very few has ever, and I don't want to get super emotional and dark here, but like brings you to tears. I'm an only child, man. So like, going to your room at night, movies or music would hit you different, and you're just like in your own world, literally. I mean, you don't have nobody to look to your right or left. You have nobody to answer to, nobody to argue over toys or time on the PlayStation or Sega. It's all yours, man. So it seemed like time would go on forever. Two songs, literally, in my adolescent life hit me like Dazed and Confused, and this other one, which was Funeral for a Friend, which came out in like 73 or 7.
That intro, yeah.
Like those two, the minute they start, you're like, you know what you're in for. Dazed and Confused obviously goes a different route than Funeral for a Friend, thankfully. But I want to start with just the title. And this is like obviously pre-existing Richard Linklater and the amazing movie that is Dazed and Confused that we well know. It's, you look at the rest of the album track list in just one view, like it's so, if you looked just at the album
in the title track, the tracks of the titles or titles of the tracks, excuse me. Yeah.
What do you want to hear? Come on, dude. Like, what are you picking?
He's
like
confused.
Blind. Anybody. Yeah. I want to know what this is about. Like, what's Dazed and Confused? I want to know what it is. I want to know what it sounds like. And I want to know what your interpretation of what Dazed and Confused even means. It was so ahead of its time, dude. Like, 69. I mean, yeah, Vietnam. I think Nixon was inaugurated almost like a week after this album came out. So like people were doing the thing, but like Dazed and Confused, to write it then and label it such was pretty provocative, I guess, for the time.
Provocative, yeah. And I think if you talk about the context of the times, I mean, listen, our parents lived through it. They would have been, my parents were adolescents at this point. I mean, 1968, 69, my dad would have been in middle school. Mom would have been in 5th grade. So maybe not even quite adolescents. But, yeah, you're talking about like 1968 was a really bad year for America. And here comes this British band in the early days of 1969 with this really overall dark album. There's some fun stuff, of course, but it's a lot darker than it is light. And Dazed and Confused is the darkest of them all. So, I mean, there's a frightening quality to it. I know it was derived from I'm Confused by Jake Holmes. It was this acoustic guy. The Jimmy Page heard him play I'm Confused. He cribbed the riff, which was played quarterly on the acoustic version. But then where the song takes off is you have the initial kind of violin bow section about 2 minutes into it, and then a complete rave freak out about 3.5 minutes into it. And then by the time they bring it back down with and then they finally come back into that riff about 5 minutes in, you realize that was a frickin' trip. And they're bringing you home, but not before one last crescendo to the end.
Sure. They took the song, they titled it, and they played it literally, which I think is the coolest part about the whole essence of what Dazed and Confused is about, because I just stated, like, what is this what does the title mean? What's your interpretation? It's like, we'll show you exactly what our interpretation is and what our experience was being Dazed and Confused. It's all here in 6 minutes and 27 seconds. Um, Mike, you and I have played this song multiple times. We'd warm up to it and practice in the attic. It's a slow riff, one that you have to take your time on. It intros with that panic-inducing / comforting bass line.
There is something oddly comforting over the years. I mean, it's just familiar. Yeah.
Yeah, familiar. And yeah, dude, it goes through a massive trip, and then it surfaces on the other side, and they pick it right back up. I can't ever help but feel most times when we're in those late hour nights at a live Dave Matthews concert, songs 16, 17, or 18, leading towards the end of the set, that they sort of take a cue from this song, because they'll have those bridge moments where they're having a freak out session and then they land it back on the other side. I think it was ahead of its time, man. Dazed and Confused is one that, will definitely lend itself to an explanation from me here in a little bit, but one that you can't look at this album without saying, it was an MVP moment for these guys. And we hit on it with Good Times, Bad Times. Babe, I'm going to Leave You is wholeheartedly a Robert Plant coming out party, but then Dazed and Confused to me is where they, quote unquote, land the plane again, because now they're like, hey, you thought you had us pinned after 3 tracks. Guess what? You don't. Here's yet another example of what we can do. It's like they're pulling out rabbit after rabbit after rabbit, and you still have to ask yourself, where are we heading in track 5?
Let's do that. Let's do side B, which I don't think will take us as long as side A, and that this kind of feeds into the categories we'll talk about later. But your time is going to. What's that?
You might kick off track 5.
Yeah, please do.
So I have a very soft spot for this song, believe it or not.
All right.
And for listeners, for anybody joining us on season 1, episode 1 here, I am born in 86, 90s kid, man. Like, I love all of this. I love Zeppelin. Thanks to Mike Carpenter here / Smiggy, I love the Stones. My dad would refuse to not allow me to love Bob Seger and the Allman Brothers and a laundry list of classic rock that I will always go to the bank on. But
you should do the Allman Brothers.
For me, it was the 90s, man. And number 5, Your Time Is Gonna Come, has essences of so much 90s grunge, it's not even funny. You listen to that song, dude, 4 minutes, 35 seconds. Meat Puppets, Soundgarden, do it. Literally run this track back and think of any of these people, right? You have to think when Chris Cornell is going through this, he's reaching into the depths of exactly what we do, which is, your influence. And this song to me has these funky, but like eerily dark, powerful riffs that are like, okay, so I would consider You Shook Me a breather over Your Time Is Gonna Come, because when the lyrics finally kick in, you're kind of arriving at like this random journey where, I can't even describe it from what I interpret it as, but has always been an interesting song for me, and one that usually when like the first 15 to 20 seconds of the song starts, I'm almost about to go next on whatever playlist I'm on, and then I realize what it is, and you ride it out. And then I'm never upset that I did. And then I think to myself, holy shit, man, I never searched this song out, but whenever it hits me and then I get through it, it like sends me into a spiral of different songs throughout the 80s and 90s that I loved. And I'm like, this one song did that to me. So
you're not alone. I'm glad you took the lead on that. I love the organ intro. I think it's a brilliant way to start a side of an album. Like, you flip it over, this is sonically something not even close to side A. So it was very purposeful. I see why it was track 5, track 1 on side B. That makes perfect sense to me. All these years, it's never connected with me, and it's by no means a bad song. It's pleasant, and it's actually sonically, it feels good. It sounds good. The acoustic, the bass, the organ on top of all of it. Kind of an easy vocal from Robert Plant. He's not really wailing too much. He's got a couple lines that he does that. But yeah, it is in some ways a palate cleanser. You don't think of it as a breather so much. I think it's a sonic palate cleanser because it has a brightness to it that the bulk of side 1 does not. I mean, Good Times, Bad Times is fun. The rest of side A is not fun. It's heavy. And then, okay, these guys can do the term that Jimmy Page often used, light and shade. Well, this was light, and it needed it tonally. We'll get to the rankings later. I will just say I'm glad you took the lead on that.
Appreciate that. Yeah, it's a fun one for me, man. And it's crazy because when I did listen to this straight through, I wasn't paying attention to what was side A or side B yet. It wasn't after I looked back that I realized that this kicked off side B, and I was like, wow. Like, I mean, it makes sense after you realize that the last 3 tracks of side A are all 6+ minutes long. But it was kind of transformative, man. And again, it's one that's like an unsung Zeppelin hero for me because you go into it and I always forget it, and then I'm glad that I saw it through. So it's a fun one for me. Track 6. Black
Mountainside. Now, I love the transition. Can we talk for a second about the transitions in this album from one track to the next?
Oh, absolutely. It's huge. It's huge. Between Your Time Is Gonna Come and Black Mountainside,
it's great.
It would be sacrilege not to discuss that transition.
It's hard to listen to Black Mountainside on one of the Led Zeppelin box sets in the 90s.
Oh, man.
They had it. Yeah. They had it separate on one of the box sets where it just started with the acoustic part. Oh. And it was actually kind of, I don't know what the word would be, a little jarring because I've always associated the start of that song with one final like crash and Your Time Is Going to Come, and it fades out with the other instruments, and it actually kind of works perfect. The other 2 transitions I love are basically 4 tom fills from You Shook Me right into Dazed and Confused. And at the end of I Can't Quit You, Baby, 4 tom fill into How Many More Times. So they do that trick twice perfectly. And I wonder, on the vinyl, I'd have to go up and dig mine out, like how the listener would have been able to tell this is where the final track begins. I think they can purposely space out the grooves to let you know, hey, this is where Dazed and Confused actually begins. Here's where the other one begins. But on the album, I love that even when you listen to Apple Music or Spotify, there's no gap. It just goes 4 tom, boom, boom, boom. So that's great. Black Mountainside, short, sweet. Talk about a palate cleanser. Opening of side B is just like, oh, wow, these guys got these different tricks up their sleeves. Part of a longer thing that Jimmy Page played called White Summer. And there's an 8.5-minute version of this and Black Mountainside on the box set from the early 90s. And it's on Coda, which we may or may not get to Coda at the end of this thing. I like it. It's less than 2 minutes, I believe, 1:56 or something like that. Or, I don't know. I'd have to check the timing on this thing. But I don't know. I mean, is it one I purposefully seek out? No. If I'm listening to the album in context of the album, I don't skip it.
Yeah, me neither. Especially the fact it's just 2 minutes long. I mean, not to badmouth any detail on it, but it's just
2:06. 2:06. There you go.
2:06, and it's coming right off of my Clear Love. For Your Time is going to come. So, yeah, I mean, can't go wrong. And let's be honest, man. Again, casual listener, if you put this album on at home and you just went through a marathon of 3 tracks in a row that were 6+ minutes long, you couldn't imagine that the tracks coming wouldn't be the same. Yeah. So you're the first 2 tracks of side B and you're done. Like you're done in this amount of time as one of those songs from side A. So at that point you're like, what is going on right now? I'm unlike you. You would be looking through, the record notes and the inserts and everything, knowing that these were only a couple minutes long. But for me, I'd be astonished whenever these 2 were done and I'm on my way. So
hey, props to Viram Jasani, who played tabla on Black Mountainside, which adds a nice little rhythmic thing. Okay, track 7, proto-punk. Look out, Led Zeppelin can play punk rock. They just did it about 7 years before the actual movement began. Communication Breakdown. Now, this is a song that over the years I've heard umpteen times on BBC sessions. Again, 3 different versions on that. None of them very different from the other. They could stretch it out live a little bit with a funky breakdown. This is just straight balls to the wall rock and roll, 2 minutes, 26 seconds. I love the simplicity of it. It's basically the same chords as Can't Explain by The Who, which I think Jimmy may have played on. I'm not entirely sure. You take Can't Explain by The Who, you take You Really Got Me, or All Day and All the Night by the Kinks. It's that sort of staccato chord riff, but it's on amphetamines. It's on speed, and it works.
I wrote the note when I was going through my first listen of this, just angsty, man. It's like, it's what you'd listen to like after you left home in the morning as you're driving to class. Like you're like,
Angsty teenager.
Just not there. Like I got to get there, but it's and it's fun, man. It's honestly one that, for all intents and purposes, to most is probably top 3 for people if they broke this album down. If I gave this to any casual listener and said rank the songs on this album, this would have to be up there for him because it's just part of that list, I think. And it's recognizable. I love JPJ on this, man.
Oh my God, he's all over.
I
mean, it's not. He could easily have just played root notes, and it would have sufficed. But there's so much more kind of dexterity in the way that he plays, and him and Bonham as a rhythm section keep this from getting boring.
There's a blip of like Pink Floyd, like 2001: A Space Odyssey, when it's like do 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 do. It's like I don't even know where he's going.
Yeah, no, in the chorus you mean, right? Where it's communication, and he's doing boom boom do 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 boom boom do 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 do. Yeah, insane.
Like he's so love it again though. You're just breaking through what 8 minutes, top to bottom for the first 3 tracks on side B right now.
So you got a lot left. You got most of it left. So we are in track 8.
Also, real quick.
Yeah.
Food for thought here to our listeners and to me. Was just looking up some random trivia here on Black Mountainside. The song is actually a cover, believe it or not.
So it is. This is what's so funny. Listen, I love Zeppelin.
I'm sure that you can give us a little more here, but
well, it was a traditional song called Black Waterside, I think.
Yeah, that's what I'm seeing here.
Yeah, he adapted it. Said, I'm the writer. It was traditional. The same way Gallows Pole started as a traditional song. Yeah.
Fair enough.
Listen, I would never say Zeppelin didn't borrow liberally. But did anyone do it as good as them? Hell, come on.
No, it's original. It's original through and through. I just thought it was interesting.
No, it is, yeah. And same thing for Babe, I'm Gonna Leave You. They had to give credit to Anne Breeden because it was initially listed as traditional back in the day. It was another one that they just said, well, we'll call this a traditional folk song, even though there was a rider, and she's been getting royalties ever since. Track 8, I Can't Quit You, Baby. It's the second Willie Dixon song on the record. This has a couple of live versions on BBC sessions. It has a live version on the album Coda from the Royal Albert Hall 1970 soundcheck, which is a little bit more lively than this take.
It would be at this point in my room. Candle lit. Parents are probably asleep by this point, and I'm maneuvering my way through this album.
Skunk weed.
Yeah, man. I would be asking myself, I would probably be thinking about whatever fling or loved one I had waiting for me at school at the locker the next day and how many times she's wronged me. But I would then immediately go to the thought of, what is Robert Plant going through, man? Like, you get to this and then you go back to Babe, I'm Gonna Leave You. You shook me. Your time is going to come. Communication breakdown. You're like, good Lord, these chaps have been through some shit.
Robert's hurting, man.
The overall cloud of this album is dark. I mean, it's just it's fun dark and it's playful dark, but like it resonates with, like, I could put this track on and drown myself in my sorrows. I could also put it on and roll the windows down and cruise and feel.
Isn't that
great
weird?
About it. It's just crazy.
Yeah, that I don't view it like, hey, I'm pissed off.
I think he's flexed up and he's pumped on all these tracks. Like he's He's passionately saying all this. He's not upset. So I feel good. But also you listen to the depth of the lyrics, especially in I Can't Quit You, Baby, and it's like this dude is completely hurt inside, but he's finding a way to like power through. And then you again, this track is what made me sort of stop and look back at tracks that preceded it because I was like, wait a minute. Like I've been on a journey and I was just taking this selfishly the whole time. This is the one where I was like, time out. Let me pause and sort of look back at what the band was doing and what the lyrics kind of look like track over track. Um, it sort of is the piece that makes you stop what you're doing, and evaluate in the moment. At least it did for me.
No, that's fair. I think that this performance is deliberately restrained because they figured You Shook Me is the blues song where we kind of stretched our wings a little bit. This one, let's play it a little more authentically blues and just keep it from, I don't know, no rave ups, no freak outs. It's pretty much by the books, which is a good and bad thing. I'll say this. If I want to chill, I'll throw on I Can't Quit You, Baby. I got a little Led Zeppelin blues playlist, and I got all the versions of this, and You Shook Me. It's repetitive, but it's relaxing in a way, and that's okay.
I'm glad you said that because also part of me throughout this track continues to ask myself why they couldn't have peppered in some of Babe, I'm Gonna Leave You or You Shook Me into it because it always, every time I listen to this song, leaves me wanting more. It's probably what they were after, but um, it is like a intravenous drug to tracks 2 and 3 every time. I'm like, I often will jump from track 8 to Babe, I'm Gonna Leave You because I'm like, I need something else. I need something else on this level. I need You Shook Me. I need something that's a little more depthy because they held back on this, And I don't know. It's being extremely nitpicky, I know, but there's just something, man. There's just something that didn't take me to that next level.
We'll get to that. I think we are pretty eye to eye on that. Fun little factoid as I'm looking at the track listing here. Each side of Led Zeppelin I is the exact same length. 22 minutes and 22 seconds for side A and side B. 8 minutes and 28 seconds of which on side B belong to How Many More Times. I bought Led Zeppelin 1 at Borders, come home, listen to it. I had this book called, I have it actually here with me, I'll show you on the Zoom. So this book I'm showing Ben over the video thing, it's called Led Zeppelin Dazed and Confused. It's the stories behind every song. I probably read this at breakfast with my toaster strudel and my Honey Bunches of Oats for about 2 years straight. And I was already reading about Led Zeppelin 1 before I bought the album. There wasn't a big write-up about How Many More Times. So while there was a live version that was okay on BBC Sessions, I didn't really have any expectations going in. I just knew it was long. This song solidified for me that Led Zeppelin 1 is, at worst, my, I don't know, fourth favorite Zeppelin album. See, we're going to have to rank these albums at the end of this miniseries. It solidified to me that, yeah, this is an album I'm going to keep coming back to because unlike Dazed and Confused, where I'd heard good live versions, or Communication Breakdown, which I'd heard a bajillion times, or Good Times, Bad Times, which I'd heard on WGKC, How Many More Times in this setting, expertly produced with a riff that is just so simple and so good. And then a part that we'll talk about in a second, about 6 minutes in, that is the slinkiest, sexiest shuffle still on record. How Many More Times? I don't think it's the flowers it deserves. From average rock listeners, I know there's a section of Zeppelin fans that love it. I count myself as one of those.
I agree with you totally. And it's what I forget to do every time I revert back to what I just explained, which was I finish I Can't Quit You, Baby. And for some reason, maybe it's because I know it's the last song that I don't want the album to quite end yet, that I jump backwards and go, Babe, I'm Gonna Leave You, You Shook Me, maybe Dazed and Confused, before then I trudge forward and go to How Many More Times. And then it's like, oh man, I'm with you. It never really resonated to me as much as that per se. Um, but I think it's fantastic for where it's placed. It's clearly one of their best on the album.
One of the best moments in becoming Led Zeppelin, where they showed them playing this on one of those, I think, Scandinavian or Denmark, one of those talk shows.
Yeah.
And they cut it off on the documentary at the end of, let's call it the first section, maybe 4 minutes worth of how many more times. And as I saw my theater, there weren't many other people in it, but I went to the opening night IMAX, and it cuts, and there's about 3 seconds rest before they get to the next scene. And a guy 3 rows back from me said, Jesus. And that was the sense that the silence when that ended was so heavy that someone had to cut through it with, holy shit. Like,
I went to see this with Keith Johnson, and I said the exact same thing. I may have let out one of my classic scenes, because is that the scene where they're kind of panning the audience, and it's like this weird white, like almost stadium seating blocks where there's like kids, and
that was a communication breakdown where they were like pelting this audience of like families with extremely loud volume. This one was, if you recall, it was black and white, but this show actually had like teenagers and young adults sitting like Indian style right up on the stage.
But it was a pretty long break after that. And I think it's finally when Keith and I looked at each other, and we both, expletives for sure, it wasn't Jesus, it was holy fuck. Just because, like, honestly, I think it may have been the first time in the theater that it got back to like baseline quiet too, where, you know, even throughout the interviews and stuff, you're just like, your brain finally caught up with what you were experiencing, which is kind of a perfect segue and also a perfect ending to the track lineup here, man. Like, you're left just wondering what the fuck. And man, like, again, this is Sopranos season 1. You're wondering, like, okay, I loved it. What was that? Who are these guys? And when can I have more? Like, you know, you get through it, and then what do you do? What do you do next? Like,
gotta wait 9 months. And think about that. Back then, it was 9 months was a long time to wait for an album. I will say about this track, I could give love to one more section. Listen, the main riff is incredible, and that goes without saying. It's so simple, but so good. The section, the Hunter section, which starts with "Oh Rosie," bam, "Oh girl," bam, and then they build in boom, bam, which I don't know how Jimmy plays that riff the way he does it. And the rhythm section is ahead of their time. I've never heard a minute section of a song sound so slinky and loose and sexy. And I mean, seriously, the "Oh Rosie" part. My dog, Rosie. Why? Okay, Rosie, and how many more times? Rosalita, Bruce Springsteen, whole lot of Rosie, AC/DC. Easy. What are we going to name the dog? Rosie. But it was how many more times was the first idea of that, because that section's so good.
Hope she doesn't get as large as whole lot of Rosie, but
no, that is very true.
Reception and legacy.
Well,
let's start with critical reception
at the time. Let's call it uneven. I have the Rolling Stone review queued up.
Please.
Okay, so this is from some Jabberwocky named John Mendelsohn, and they waited 2 months to publish this, March 15th, 1969. To give you a hint as to what I'm about to read, they had a rocky relationship with Rolling Stone thereafter, and it was not till a young teenager by the name of Cameron Crowe came along that they actually allowed Rolling Stone to do a feature story about them. To give you a couple of lines from this here, oh boy,
you think they were incendiary to young Cameron? Incendiary.
They 100% were. Okay, this is the last paragraph of the Rolling Stone review. In their willingness to waste their considerable talent on unworthy material, the Zeppelin has produced an album which is sadly reminiscent of Truth by Jeff Beck. Like the Beck Group, they are also perfectly willing to make themselves a 2- or more accurately, 1.5-man show in reference to Jimmy and Robert. He's saying that Jimmy's the one man, Robert is half a singer. It would seem that if they're to help fill the void created by the demise of Cream, they will have to find a producer and editor and some material worthy of their collective attention. Suffice to say, Rolling Stone's reviewer, John Mendelsohn, not a fan. He was not alone, but there were still some positive reviews. I think that if we were to give a star rating at the reviews at the time, it would have been 3 out of 5 or 3.5 out of 5. But people were not universally saying this is some groundbreaking thing. It really took them playing date after date in New York, Chicago, Los Angeles, Boston, and then FM radio stations playing these songs to get them big. And it was the summer of 1969 where, imagine like we're in our festival circuit now. We have Lollapalooza is not a rock festival anymore, but just think of all the different ones scattered throughout the summer across the country. They would have been playing like the 5:30 to 6:30 slot, building a reputation. And by the end of the summer, they're playing in front of 80,000 people at Lolla.
Still daylight. You know, you leave, you're like, damn, like something was there. I don't know what it was. I also think a lot of it, man, is like believability. And this may get into a rabbit hole of absurdity, but hearing what Led Zeppelin I is as a first-time listener, again, I'm going to revert back to like what we know now as AI and, you know, computer-generated mumbo-jumbo. It almost doesn't seem real. Like Robert's voice seems not real. And you question, is it a guy? Is it a girl? I mean, realistically, if you didn't know the band and you're looking to critique them for the first time, like, what is this, you know? And I think fear, more often than not, sends people in a bad review way. So they are unsure of what they just heard of. It's new. It did something to them. It moved. And sometimes that isn't, in their opinion, for the best, right? It's like, first time I watched American History X, I knew it was incredible. I was moved in a direction that was not good. I was like, I don't know what I feel. I need to take a shower and like move on from this thing. It did something to me. So I think that Led Zeppelin was such an abrupt hello that critique to me is accurate for the time. And I love it, man, because I'm trying to do the same thing here while we do this mini series podcast, which is take myself out of the knowledge of everything that comes after and the monster and legends that we know of Led Zeppelin, and sectorize it down to not overexerting the acclaim that we know they have, and being too excited about it, because like it's hard. We're clear fans, right? So I don't want to like overdo it by saying they can't be touched. This is perfection. God, track by track. Like, let's just goo and gaw over these guys. Reception wise, if I heard that album blindly and I got through it, I would be hungry for more. I'd be ready for more. I would wonder who they are, where they live, what they do. I would want to hang out with them. But I would also be like, are we going to get more? Like, is this sustainable? It was kind of bluesy. I'm usually not a blues guy, but I am. Maybe I am, because I loved that. Like, you know what I mean? It's sending you in a whirlwind of direction where you have more questions than answers, right? So fear, from the writer's perspective, it's easy. Also, man, let's be honest. You're in journalism. It's easy to go the direction of discrediting than giving too much praise, because nine times out of 10, you're going to win in the eyes of your readers if you called the shot. And in this poor chap's run, he probably did not, and may have spent his lifetime regretting it.
I know that Rolling Stone did, to an extent, regret that, and then that's why the Cameron Crowe thing in the mid-'70s happened, because they had to basically sell Zeppelin on the idea of a feature story, and they said, hey, this kid likes you. And as Cameron Crowe says here, years later, he looked back on it and said, when Zeppelin I came out, it was a time of supergroups of furiously hyped bands who could barely cut it, and Zeppelin initially found themselves fighting upstream to prove their authenticity. So I can believe that. The book I showed you, this song-by-song thing, was written by a guy named Chris Welch, who at the time was writing for Melody Maker magazine. And listen, there were some overwhelmingly positive reviews. He said, Jimmy Page triumphs, Led Zeppelin is a gas. In Oz, another music magazine back then, Felix Dennis regarded it as an album that, quote, defies immediate classification or description simply because it's so obviously a turning point in rock music that only time proves capable of shifting it into eventual perspective. Damn, Felix. Pretty spot on. So there were some glowing reviews. There were a couple of stinker reviews, but I do think it was the live following that came that summer that propelled them into Led Zeppelin II, which had the great material, but by the time it came out in October of 1969 was, well, did it get to number one? It did get to number one. So they go from 9 in a year. Let's be real. They go from a year, from their first day recording Led Zeppelin I in Olympic Studios in London, to being the number one band in the world. One single year. And I thought the documentary did a pretty good job of encapsulating just how insane that climb was for them. Okay, so we got through the tracks. We got through the reception of Legacy, the recording, the background. Is it time for the Needleheads categories and awards?
Almost. I do want to talk about influence on other artists and genres of the time. I know, like, we're talking Rolling Stone here. I actually stumbled through this journey across, which we'll get to. We're doing the miniseries, so I'll talk about this in space. But Lester Bangs and his review of Led Zeppelin III.
Oh, yeah.
A lot comes between 1 and 3, obviously. But I would love to kind of dig into any of that knowledge that you've got.
He didn't like Zeppelin.
No, he wasn't a fan, but he also admitted that he had a love-hate relationship with it, probably because it wasn't until Led Zeppelin III that he jumped on the wagon of actually writing about them. Again, I think it's, you hate when you miss a train, and you're not on it, and all it does is add resentment to the fact that you probably questioned it in the beginning, and then it's too late to jump on the train at that point. So,
well, and there's also a factor that they could have been construed as packaged. In other words, think about the meteoric rise. You didn't get that from the Beatles or Stones.
To quote Lester Bangs from my memory, he said loud and brash, 2 words that can describe Led Zeppelin, and you're thinking yes and yes. Is there something wrong with that? Right. But if it's not your cup of tea, maybe it's not your cup of tea. But I also think there was a level of everybody was looking for their moment and something that would make them stand out amongst everyone else in their articles. And if you're going to go against at now in 2025, arguably one of the most powerful bands of all time, what better way to try to get your name out there than
I would do it. Yeah. All right. So as far as influences or the bands that kind of were spun off from Zeppelin, I don't know why the first band I thought of, they weren't great. They had a couple good songs, but think of a Montrose or something. Those were bands I think that were immediately influenced by the riff side of Led Zeppelin. I think the big thing, though, that no band was able to achieve themselves after being influenced by Led Zeppelin was the sort of genre-spanning stuff that they could do and the fact that they were extremely versatile as a band. So if you look at the 70s and all the stadium rock bands, The Who were already around. The Who were kind of doing their own thing. I know they got lumped in with Zeppelin sometimes, but very different bands from one another, other than the crazy drummer that, tore up hotel rooms. And then, I don't know, the Stones, completely different from Led Zeppelin, a completely different swing, and they were, contemporaries, but...
I've got this vinyl over there, and I just laugh whenever I see it. I dig them. So, but same time, 1969, London, Uriah Heep.
Yeah, yeah.
So there's essences of what these guys were during Led Zeppelin I floating around, right? They weren't secularly the only loud and brash band that were coming out with some of this unique sound. I just think the execution of how they formulated the composition top to bottom with a quick 9-track, gut punch of different tracks was spot on. And obviously, as we maneuver through this miniseries, we'll talk about other influences as later decades come. I don't want to jump into them now because they aren't around and they don't exist. So,
well, I think Uriah Heep's actually a good example of that. There were some loud British bands. Deep Purple maybe. But again, here's the thing. Deep Purple, they had their own thing. They had the organ was such a big part of their sound, that really overdriven organ sound that you hear on Highway Star. You know,
The other is obviously, I mean, Sabbath. Like,
yeah, but I was just thinking about them. But to their credit, the first Sabbath album sounds unlike anything that ever came before. It is for heavy metal what Led Zeppelin is for hard rock. And I know Zeppelin gets put into I don't think very astute observers use that heavy metal term for that. They aren't metal. Sabbath is the forebearer of heavy metal.
and Tony probably had the first SG for sure over Jimmy, but I would love that argument.
I wonder, or Gibson SG? That's more his signature guitar. On this album, it was all Telecaster, and it was a psychedelic Telecaster gifted to him from Jeff Beck after Jimmy suggested to the Yardbirds after Eric Clapton left, hey, this Jeff Beck guy might be a good replacement. So Jeff was like, thanks, buddy. Here's his Tele.
Unbelievable. Okay, so we've got we pretty much hit everything, man. Incredibly enough, we will now move on to
Is it time?
the awards.
I'm excited for this. So here's what we're going to do. For every episode and every album we do, we are going to end, or towards the end of the podcast, give our certain individual awards. We will end it with rankings. We'll explain all the terminology we're going to use for it. Here are the categories with which we'll break this down. First one is called Killer Line. The differentiation, as you and I talked about yesterday, Ben, with Killer Line and not Killer Lyric, is a killer line is the mix of the lyric and the delivery. If we just said killer lyric, we're looking for poetry. Well, guess what? No offense to Robert and Jimmy. On Led Zeppelin I, lyrically, it ain't that strong. But it doesn't always matter the way he delivers it.
Heard, Chef. Secondly, to that note, I would challenge absolutely anybody listening to this podcast to go track for track through Led Zeppelin I, reading the track notes, and try to pick out a overly significant moment. It is the hardest thing to do if you're not simultaneously listening and hearing to the delivery, because, man, it ain't poetry.
Nope.
It is, and it has turned into it. But if you're just reading it on paper, man, it is a tall tale to try to get that accomplished. So
I was just thinking, Ben, about the communication breakdown course. Communication breakdown, it's always the same. Having a nervous breakdown drives me insane.
Yeah.
All right? I mean, I've heard worse lyrics, but it's not great. It's what it is.
Again, it's all about the delivery. If you came into practice one day and you just read that out to us blindly, we'd probably be like, yeah, man. I mean,
We'll go with it.
it would be throwaway if something better came along,
Yeah.
which is crazy to think about here. So how do we want to formulate this?
Okay, so what we'll do, I'll list the categories first, and we'll go one by one. Killer line is first. That is a mix of lyric and delivery, what we think is the best delivered line on the album. Alternative album title. If it weren't called Led Zeppelin I, what could it have been called instead? The next one, MVP, just what it sounds like. Out of all the players on the album, who is the most valuable? Side A, side B, we simply select which side of the vinyl we prefer. Here's where it gets unique to this podcast. The weakest song, the strongest song. We have terminology we'll explain to the audience out there. The worst song we will dub the Dustiest Crumpet. Now, that was something you just coined last week.
Yes.
The best song is the Spiciest Biscuit. Do you recall the etymology, the genesis of this term Spiciest Biscuit? Because I do.
I believe I do, so I'll go first, because
Okay.
if you know the background of it, then we'll hope it aligns. By the way, the Dustiest Crumpet will always be a testament to the band that we're going through right now, because thinking through this, we know Spicy Biscuit / Spiciest Biscuit has been part of our terminology for as long as I can remember. The parlay of Spiciest Biscuit into a more British idealism is clearly Dustiest Crumpet. So hopefully at some point or another that could be turned into, hey man, that's also a good thing. But as kids say these days, Spiciest Biscuit to me though, I want to say that we were going to St. Louis,
Yes.
and we were on our way to see Dave Matthews Band.
No.
No, I'm sorry. We were on our way to see Radiohead.
In Rainbow's Tour, 2008.
I was going to community college at Parkland, and you texted me as I'm sitting in class asking me what I was doing that night. And I said, I'm literally sitting in class and I have zero plans. You said, I'll be there in 20 minutes to pick you up. You showed up to the front door of the Circle Drive at Parkland College, picked me up. We took off. You literally put in my lap 2 tickets to Radiohead and Rainbows in St. Louis. We literally left. And on the way down, as we often do, we're sharing bands, we're sharing tracks and so forth. And I believe, if memory serves me, I showed you Mofro.
Mofro.
And I told you that, to me, this band is a spicy biscuit because their riffs are just absurdly spicy. And, Nate, I hope he listens to this, to give a shout out to him. He, over the last couple of years, has introduced me to a band. Again, I'm drawing a complete blank here because I'm so in the zone of Led Zeppelin. Rickshaw Billy's Burger Patrol.
A lot of spicy biscuits there, yeah.
Spicy biscuits there. But basically, the essence of it is it's a track that if you're with a friend, and a very dear friend, will make you like cackle and have repeated belly laughs because it's just so good and so absurd that like you don't have words, you don't have the ability to formulate a thought. It's just what it is. And like it could come in many forms, but for us in that moment, I was like, Mike, I've been on this band, JJ Gray and Mofro, you got to hear them. And they're spicy, dude. They're spicy. Biscuit.
So that's our terminology. Yeah. Dustiest Crumpet, the weakest song, Spiciest Biscuit, the strongest. If you want to think of it this way, the way that Jules in Pulp Fiction says, that is a tasty burger. That is a spicy biscuit. It is the strong. We're going to just dub it the strongest song of the album. And to be honest, Ben, I think it's a mix of, we are acknowledging individually, we're going to each individually choose these.
Without telling each other proactively, by the way. So.
Exactly. And as we individually choose these, I think Spiciest Biscuit is kind of a mix of, yeah, it might be the best track on the album, but it's a little bit mixed in with what we just view as our favorite. So in other words, I don't think Spiciest Biscuit is always going to be the obvious best composition. No, it's something that just strikes us individually. And then maybe at the end of the episode, we'll try to come up with a cumulative choice for what we deem to be the spicy biscuit of this album as a podcast. Are you ready for these categories?
I'm ready. I hope our listeners are ready. I've been looking forward to this since we spawned this idea, and it's here right now. So let's ride.
Killer line. This is a mix of vocal and lyric and vocal delivery, excuse me.
I could lose our listeners for the rest of the time on this one, but the first Babe in Babe, I'm Gonna Leave You is one of those moments where it's impossible to not think about after it's said and done, and something you revisit by itself on that lengthy track. Just to hear it. It's something I would share with my wife. It's something that I would share with friends who haven't listened to Zeppelin, but let me just play you this opening line. Just listen to the subtleness but depth of this dude deliver the word babe, right? So in thinking about this again, like I said, I'm not going to not admit that this was the most difficult, painstaking task in this whole list of awards for this album, because I was initially looking for like a clear-cut, directive, deep lyric set that was going to be like, this is monumental, this is what put this record on the map. It doesn't exist, man. This album is a composition of 4 dudes, and none of which rose above or below each other. They were all even keel the whole fucking way through. And I think this Babe lyric, to me, with the delivery, is a testament to all that. Like, there is no slowest man. There is no person that was stronger than the other the entire time. I think they all played off each other. And again, Babe, to me, and Babe, I'm Gonna Leave You was what hit me the most. So
That's fair. The first Babe. I agree with that. As it's not my choice, but I do think there's a quality to his voice where that's a great pick. And you could show the casual listener that never listened to that song, and it reminds me of Little Richard in that Jimi Hendrix documentary, that one from like '72.
big toes stand up in my boot.
I mean, yeah, it just elicits this sort of response. Okay, my killer line: Little Robert Anthony wants to come and play. This is during the Hunter section of How Many More Times. And he does like, Little Robert Anthony wants to come and play. And he does that in that really high register, but he's got a swagger to it. And to me, the way I view this, lyric and delivery. Good Times, Bad Times is a well-delivered vocal, but it is sort of a restrained Robert Plant. By track 9 and How Many More Times and the Hunter section, 6 minutes in, this is Led Zeppelin II Robert Plant. This is the guy you're going to hear in Whole Lotta Love, maturing over the course of 36 hours of recording time. And the swagger with which he delivers that line, the playfulness of it, it's just an old blues trope. He put his name in there. I want to come and play. Okay, we know the double entendres and all that. It is and always will be my favorite line from this album, because it's just like, damn. All right, Robert, 19-year-old Robert Plant, he's arrived. He is here.
It could be him doing a little call out to his younger self. And man, I know we'll get to it here very shortly, but the fact that you ranked that in lyric and delivery from that track to me is just a testament, because I think they were just having fun.
Yeah.
And clear in that line. So it's like, hey man, like listen and enjoy type of thing. Like we're just having
riffing.
fun.
They're riffing. That's it. I don't know why. I was thinking about Killer Line, and I know lyrically this is not the strongest album of theirs by any stretch. Probably, quite frankly, the weakest. But I'll get to that with hot take here at the end of this. We'll give maybe a hot take for the album. Alternative album title. Admittedly, before we start this category, Ben, we will admit that we're giving alternative titles to albums that are often beloved and classic, and people would say, why the hell would you rename it? It's just a fun exercise to see, could there have been a different album title that might have worked for the songs inside, for the album cover, for the whole package? Could something else have worked? What did you come up with?
I would love for you to go first on this one.
Okay. I'm going to give you 3, but I got to pick one, ultimately, of these 3. And actually, if it's okay, can I let you pick the best of the 3?
Absolutely. Rock on.
I'm going with the album cover. Again, they are not better than Led Zeppelin self-titled. Just Led Zeppelin I, however you want to name it. But I have Crash Landing, as in they're basically just crashing into your consciousness. In Flames, referencing the Hindenburg, and Inferno, again, the flame sort of thing. I don't know. Crash Landing, In Flames, Inferno, they aren't as good as Led Zeppelin I, but if you had to pick, what would you say?
Probably Crash Landing.
I'll stick with that. It's not great, but it'll do.
If I were in the studio, I'd be like, guys, I mean, if we're going literal and we're not just going to self-title this album, it's got to be something, and you can play on the fact that that would be the entry into the hearts and ears and minds of everyone. So
I just think it has an aggressiveness to it that if you were to name it something other than self-titled, which I like the practice of a self-titled debut album, I think that's a classic way to do it. But if they were to name it, Crash Landing has a connotation of aggression, volume, noise. So yeah, that was mine. What do you got?
Yeah, so I sort of took a playful approach to this. I looked at it from the level of knowing that there would be no possible way. And for the listeners, this is going to get a little bit easier, I hope, when we maneuver different miniseries. Obviously, right now we're dealing with Led Zeppelin 1. Led
2,
Zeppelin
3, and 4.
Us, we're leveled to a band that self-titled their albums with numbers, and there aren't playful, artistic names. However, that said, my dad always coined a term when my mom, he'd come home and we were doing chicken, and he would say, Old Dead Yardbird. Well, to me, they were a version of the Yardbirds that didn't work out. So I would coin the album as Old Dead Yardbird.
Do you know where that term or phrase came from? Was that just something he said?
He would just, I mean, probably a old adage of his Kentucky childhood growing up as
Old
what
Dead
they were.
Yardbird.
But Old Dead Yardbird. What's for dinner? Old Dead Yardbird, which is chicken. But ironically enough, the fact that they were the Yardbirds and they could have been like the Yardbirds for the rest of the time. I kind of took as, hey, we're Jimmy playing on Hey We're Dead, and this is my new band.
Yeah.
So this is Led Zeppelin, Old Dead Yardbirds. Yeah.
Okay, I like the personalization of that. That's cool. We'll do again. We are starting this category with a band whose album titles are just so ingrained. When we go through further miniseries and we get to bands, and then here's the thing: not every album we cover is going to be a classic. Some are going to suck.
I also interpreted it not so literally in what I was hearing and listening to. It was, I'm a fan of like the Yardbirds, and I know Jimmy, and I know that he's doing something else, and they're coming into the world, right? Like, how's he going to still capture me and pull me along with him?
Yeah.
There's a lot that went into that thought, along with just the playful side of like, Jeff's gone, Eric's gone. These are my new guys, but I still want to play on the fact that you guys should know who I am without maybe me, knowing who I am.
Sure.
So,
I think for the next two categories, we might be in pretty quick agreement on this. MVP of the album.
Led Zeppelin I, MVP, Jimmy Page. I tried to give an accolade to all the other three. Bonham is Bonham, and Led Zeppelin I would not be Led Zeppelin I without Bonham, without JPJ, without Robert. It wouldn't exist. The only thing and the only tipping point for me was that from top to bottom, this was Jimmy Page's canvas. He bought the canvas. He had a vision for the canvas, and he also compiled the other MVPs that would be himself and recruited each one. So it would be impossible to say anybody else stood out over knowing that, and we would know this at the time of release too, that was all true in fact. So not only is he an MVP on the album, he was an MVP prior to the album starting, an MVP in producing the album, and an MVP in getting it out in such a timely manner with the all-stars that are on it.
100%. You said everything that I would have said. And I will make sure through this mini-series that every band member gets an MVP. And I've already thought about, I know which album is Robert the MVP. I know. Which one's Bonham? I know. And then I got one for JPJ, which I feel kind of bad for him because he's so damn good at everything he does that it's just this album is Jimmy, right? It's Jimmy. All right. Side A, side B.
Led Zeppelin too. And you can't give the credit for the birth to something without daddy.
Yeah, pretty much. Side A or side B? What do you got?
This might blow your mind.
No.
Side B, dude.
What? Explain.
And well, we will get there.
Okay. Okay, well, here's the thing. If explaining it is going to potentially get in the way of song rankings, then you can withhold it if you want.
I'll explain this much. Side B to me was the main course, amongst other things. That might be a terrible analogy for how to explain this because there was so much in side A, but to me, it's like you're sitting down in a nice restaurant, you're having laughs with friends, you get your first round of drinks, and you're thinking about probably no appetizers, but then somebody else suggests one, and they come, which spawns into another drink or a different drink, or I want to have what he's having. That to me was side A, right? It's whenever you flip the album over and you jump into side B that like what I ordered, the main course was put in front of me, and I truly was able to resonate on what side A was, but enjoy side A and what was coming in side B. So ultimately, when I chose the two, I was like, I have to choose side B because it made side A make sense and for me to enjoy it and look forward to what was coming. And without that, it wouldn't be the complete experience that it was for me. So side B got the nod. Wow. If that makes sense.
That is, if you have we'll call that your hot take.
I'll take it.
I'm going side A considerably, and that's not saying I don't like side B. I enjoy side B because it's kind of weird and funky and all over the map. I enjoy listening to it. Side A just is all killer, no filler, so that was an easy choice for me. I thought that would be pretty quick, but I appreciate the differentiation. Now it is the time for Dustiest, Crumpet, and Spiciest Biscuit. Here's how we'll do it. Let's first each predict and try, as we're looking at each other here, to not emote as we guess this. We're going to guess what the other person would say for Dustiest, Crumpet, and Spiciest Biscuit. If we need to turn our Zoom cameras off for this, we could do that.
We've known each other long enough. We can be professional about this. So, your Dustiest Crumpet. And now, mind you, this is helpful because we've gone through the roadmap of the tracks.
Yeah.
I think your Dustiest Crumpet, you gave some flowers to this, but Black Mountainside.
Okay.
Spiciest Biscuit. Dazed and Confused.
Okay. So you think my Dustiest Crumpet is Black Mountainside, Spiciest Biscuit is Dazed and Confused. I think your Dustiest Crumpet is Black Mountainside. I think your Spiciest Biscuit is Babe, I'm Gonna Leave You.
Wow. Okay.
Okay, so would you like to begin these festivities? Start with your Dustiest Crumpet, number 9, and work your way up to number 1, your Spiciest Biscuit.
And this is where we're ranking.
Correct. We're ranking them, and we'll see if we got our predictions about the others, Crumpet and Biscuit, correct.
Hate to burst the bubble so early, and this is going to just be a tell for how awesome this podcast is hopefully going to be and how much enjoyment I'm at least going to get out of it.
Okay.
Track 9, You Shook Me.
Wow. Whoa. Okay.
I truly cannot make it past the journey, man. And to me, it just was enough of a breather and a break from what I just experienced and what I would experience next that I don't even know if I got a fair shake.
Okay.
And that's why it's there.
I get
Eight.
it.
I can't quit you, baby.
So you have the 2 blues standards, 8 and 9. Okay.
Yeah.
That's fair.
To me, I love blues, by the way. So for the listeners, it's not a hatred thing towards what was going on there, but I just think there was some powerful stuff that was in a very short list of tracks. 9 tracks. There's not a lot to work with here. Black Mountainside, number 7. 6, Communication Breakdown.
Okay.
Right in the middle, man, sandwiched. And I just cannot say enough about this song. I think it was obvious in my analogy with the 90s, and why I was so happy to hear you talk about it. Was Dazed and Confused. Just like it is in the album, right? It's like right there, and it's...
You have a number 5.
Yeah, number 5.
Wow.
Something that might be puzzling to most, but like it initially grabbed me. It just took me time to like get used to it.
Okay.
4, Your Time Is Gonna Come.
Okay.
3, Babe, I'm Gonna Leave You.
Okay.
2, Good Times, Bad Times.
Okay.
1, My Spiciest Biscuit is How Many More Times. And
holy shit.
man, for the listeners, I know this would take immediate criticism, but what we're doing here is we're not ranking like the best, right? We wouldn't know the best at this point. I'm talking about like resolve of my experience listening to these things and track by track, taking myself out of what I know about the album, what I know about my past and how each track grabbed me. I was trying to play this close to the hip in terms of like what each track did for me. And the one that I kept going back to, like if I'm going to go to that album and press play, was immediately going to the one that usually was forgotten. kind of like the analogy of beer or acquired taste.
Yeah.
That stuck with me so powerfully that I'm like, yes, of course, and it was a flip flop. I was like, do I put Dazed and Confused 1 and how many more times at 5, or because it wasn't easy enough to say how many more times at 1 and then not put Good Times Bad Times at 2.
Sure.
It took me a little bit of time to get used to what Dazed and Confused became for me, even though it was so powerful in the beginning, right? It was an emotional experience. It was dark. It was dreary. But to me, how many more times was just consistent, and it put me in a place where I was like, I'm thinking about more. I love what these guys are doing, and Spiciest Biscuit.
You hid that well when we were talking about that song. I never would have guessed that you'd have that number 1 because you gave it some flowers, but nothing outlandish. Okay, so we'll recap here after I go with mine. So my Dustiest Crumpet, my number 9 out of 9 is I Can't Quit You, Baby. I find it to be limp. I will listen to it as background noise, but Led Zeppelin I is not meant to be background noise. I think it is by far the weakest track of the album. And frankly, the only weak track per se.
Yeah.
8, Black Mountainside. I like it. I think it's a cool diversion in the early part of side B. So again, anything else from here on out, I like to a certain extent. Because it is sort of a interlude, I did not put it any higher than 8. I might even enjoy it more than number 7, which is Your Time Is Gonna Come. This one has never really landed for me, but I appreciate why others like it. I think they perfected this later, a couple years with Hey, Hey, What Can I Do? Which is sort of my woman's a hoe. Like, I hate her. She sucks. But it's playful, and it for some reason sounds fun. You know, Your Time Is Gonna Come. If you read the lyrics, it's basically like an update of that Beatles song. Oh, God, what's the John Lennon song? Run for Your Life.
Yeah.
Where he's like, I'm going to murder you, basically. Like,
and
what the hell?
I do want to comment on that placement of that, because to me, Your Time Is Going to Come. I wasn't looking into it in the depthy way of like speaking directly to a counterpart or girl.
Yeah.
I was like sort of the livelihood of it. It was like, Your Time Is Going to Come. It sort of like lifts me up. Like,
yeah.
I'm with it. Your time is going to come.
I get that.
And so it was 4 for me because I'm like, it sort of speaks to like a level. And again, man, we're dealing with 9 tracks here. This wasn't.
Well, and you're saying it's more like Your Time to Shine is going to come. Like, I could see how the chorus, because the chorus is fun.
Reception of a perception, really, man. Perception of how you took this when you were a kid. Is it not impossible to get past right now? Like, first time you listen to it, first essence of how these things resonated with you, you can pull it right back to memory. And I think it's clear in these rankings because it's funny to see that. I would have lost a lot of money if I would have said that Your Time Is Going to Come would have been in your bottom half. For sure.
Yeah, yeah. It's just never connected with me. Now, we both have Communication Breakdown at number 6. It's good. It's really good, but for some reason, am I ever gravitating towards playing it? I've heard it a bajillion times. Maybe it's burnout. Maybe it's the fact it's such a simple song, but it's well done, and it rocks, but it's number 6. Or number 5, You Shook Me. I love this version of You Shook Me. I love the solos in the middle. You know, the song itself is nothing special. The performance is. Number 4, Good Times, Bad Times. Where did you have Good Times, Bad Times?
Number 2.
Wow, number 2. Okay. 3, Babe, I'm Gonna Leave You. I do love that. You had a 3 as well?
3 for me.
Okay. Number 2, Dazed and Confused.
Holy fuck.
Yeah. My Spiciest Biscuit. I can't believe you picked this. I thought this was going to be a hot take. How many more times?
Dude, no fucking way.
Yeah. I have from day one, this has been the song. If I had, do you remember back on iPods where it would have a play count for your songs?
Yeah.
You could sort it on iTunes, right? And it would say you've listened to this song 183 times. I I don't know if I ever specifically checked how many more times, but in my life, from when I first got the Led Zeppelin 1 CD, which I have right over here with all the other Zeppelin CDs I initially bought, to now, I know that how many more times is up there with probably When the Levee Breaks, Immigrant Song, Whole Lotta Love. And that doesn't mean that all these others are Spicy Biscuits necessarily, but because this album has so many heavy hitters that are sort of like classic rock radio staples, I thought it was going to be more of a surprise. But it's funny, I was sort of looking on the Led Zeppelin subreddit, for example. They love How Many More Times. I'm like, there are people that acknowledge this is an incredible track.
Funnily enough, I didn't look at any of that. And as I would go to bed each night leading up to the kickoff of this pod, I kept thinking to myself, are you going to go with the obvious choices or are you going to go with your gut?
Yeah.
Because I would go to bed thinking, man, the one standout track of this entire album, even though it's like half instrumental, right? And it would be looked at as a quote unquote throwaway track in most cases, just because, like, if I were the producer in the studio with these guys and I'm going track by track, it's the ugly duckling. It's the one that doesn't seamlessly fit in with the other tracks that are before it. It obviously matches well with Black Mountainside because it's right after, but it doesn't necessarily just bode to any of the journey that you're on and sort of not much after. But I kept going back to it, man. And like, I kept going back to it because I also was there early on with, once you made it through the intro and the instrumental, you get the goods. And I loved where I was at with that. I truly would not have ever thought that that would have been, certainly not in season 1, episode 1 of this podcast, that we would have aligned wholeheartedly on such a crazy ass Spicy Biscuit throughout Led Zeppelin 1. That's insane to me. That's awesome.
How Many More Times is great. I think the studio track is better than most live tracks I've heard, because what often happened in the live track is the main riff would be going, and when Robert's vocals would come in, the band would scale back. I understand that in a live setting. If you listen to the studio track, what I love about it is the riff is insistent. And what I love stereo spread-wise, you listen on your cans that you got there, left-right spread, Jimmy double tracks that guitar. It has almost like a synthesizer-like quality. There's such a bite to his distortion that he puts on the guitar that the first time I heard it, I was like, what the hell is he doing with his guitar? Meanwhile, the bass line is just, hypnotic. The drums are incredible. The instrumental sections, I think, are really interesting. And the whole time, it leads up to still one of my favorite moments in any Zeppelin song. And we're going to talk about plenty of other cool moments. Out on the Tiles has one. There's these... I always thought this was like a forgotten Led Zeppelin song. So it's actually kind of reassuring to think, oh shit, I'm not the only one that thinks How Many More Times is awesome.
Telling me, dude. Fuck, I'm like elated right now. I thought for sure that I would potentially sink the whole ship right now by coming out of the gates and putting that as my number 1.
Where did you think I might have put it?
I thought well, you know what? Honestly, man, the beauty of this podcast, and probably the reason that we finally decided to pull the trigger on this, is that you and I align often on the sonic side of what we gain from music and movies. We have historically amongst even all of our other friends, man. It hasn't been like a haphazard, I'm going to jump on your ship just because I'm on your side type of thing either. It's like we have randomly figured out moments where I'm like, you love that? Dude, I show you a million reasons why I love that. This is yet another example of that. However, I truly would have probably thought it was floating around 4 or 5 for you.
Okay.
I knew you would have appreciated exactly what it was about. I just figured, as a seasoned Zeppelin fan who, listeners, we'll probably get to this at some point, but we might as well just rip the Band-Aid off. If your journey is having a website and sharing cassettes as a kid for Zeppelin fans everywhere, would have had a laundry list of tracks from this album that were historically great. And that one was not one that I would have bet my bottom dollar on being in the top 4 or 5 for you solely because of what came before it. So
Fair.
very surprising. I, again, sort of kicked the podcast off by discussing, my internal feelings on the way music moves me. And a lot of this album does. It's just that one, again, man, it was like you initially call it the ugly duckling, and then you realize you're like, if I had to, back in YMCA pickup league days, like had to pick someone as my number one pick because I'm captain, like I'm, come over here how many more times? Like, let's see what you can do. It's just so intriguing.
That I'm genuinely, I thought, man, here's my big, like, I'm going to land this, like, bombshell. I'm going to say, no, not Dazed and Confused, not Baby Up.
I'm also glad you went second, dude, because, like, I would have probably in the moment, just admittedly enough, maybe have gone with my other reaction, which, because again, like I said, I'd gone back and forth all week. Dazed and Confused. I'm a bass player. Like, I love that song. It formulated a lot of my style and what I move forward with. But again, man, the more and more I went back and forth with it, I'm like, nope, I'm going to go with this. If you would have gone first, I almost would have felt bad to follow up with the same thing, but it worked with you having that because that was clear probably from the get-go that was your spiciest biscuit.
Let's flip the order next time. So when we do the track order, you go second and I'll go first. But yeah, I mean, here's the thing. I mean, Dazed Confused, I have it number 2 because it's just that good. Babe, I'm Gonna Leave You, number 3. It's just that good. The only song I don't like on this album is I Can't Quit You, Baby. It's limp, and they did better versions of it. And I think they still could have, they still could have stood to put an inspired version of it. Even if they were going for the breather or the quiet before the storm of How Many More Times, they still could have put something more dynamic. And instead, you listen, even the guitar licks on I Can't Quit You, Baby, it's like Jimmy's just dicking around. It's not even like, it's not good.
Given the conversation, too, I'm going to be a good boy and stick with my track rankings. But I Can't Quit You, Baby, and You Shook Me were teeter-tottering at 8 or 9 for me, and I just was like, at the end of the day, like I discussed as we were going track by track, You Shook Me was the unwanted palate cleanser between a great round of happy hour drinks and an appetizer, and I'm like, I want to keep going, and somebody's saying, no, our table's ready, you got to go sit down. Like, fuck.
That's actually that's an apt analogy. That makes sense the way you say it. I mean, yeah, You Shook Me is the whatever the opposite of beneficiary is of being placed in between just Babe, I'm Gonna Leave You and Dazed Confused. I mean, you could have put any song in between there, or you would have said, guys, Jesus Christ, I just listened to Babe, I'm Gonna Frickin' Leave You and Dazed Confused. I whatever this is, it ain't gonna cut it compared to that. So, last thing here, remind me, your Dustiest Crumpet was I Can't Quit You, Baby? No.
You Shook Me.
That's right. So we each had one of the blue songs as the Dustiest Crumpet, and we each have How Many More Times as the Spiciest Biscuit. Hot take. Do you have any other hot takes aside from side B being your favorite over side A?
I don't, man. I think that was really that was going to be my probably most massive takeaway from the album was I knew when I wrote that down that it was going to be beyond just How Many More Times, which I thought was going to be controversial, which clearly is not. I knew side B would be met with like but why? There's so much of what and who Led Zeppelin is and has been forever on side A. How do you forget that? And it's like, I'm not arguing that that's not in existence. If we're arguing what would you take away and completely delete, it would be hard to argue against side A, but I'm looking at it as a cohesive unit of I get both, but I have to pick a side. And there's a line in the sand, like I'm jumping to side B just because I think I could play that on repeat over and over again and never get tired of the run.
Sure.
So, yeah.
My hot take, it's going to sound like an insult, but it's not. The songs on Led Zeppelin 1, the songwriting, is whatever. The songwriting, just the songwriting itself. These were merely vehicles for Jimmy Page to say, check out all these new toys I assembled. Check this out. Good times, bad times, communication breakdown. here's a couple fairly generically written rock songs, but we're just going to play the shit out of them. Okay, 2 blues songs we didn't even write. Fine. Dazed and Confused, probably the best composition, but again, borrowed from some folk singer, the main riff. How Many More Times? It's just a vamp. That's it. It's an 8.5-minute vamp, but it's so freaking good. My point is that, I mean, Your Time Is Gonna Come, I don't think as a song is that well written. I mean, the lyrics are whatever, and the chord progression is pretty standard, but they are so good individually and collectively that they can carry these songs that are rather basic and turn it into a very dynamic album. To me, the strength of this album is not the songs, it's the performances. And what is so cool is as we go through this miniseries, we're about to get into what I think is the real meat of Led Zeppelin. And it's not even Led Zeppelin 2. I like Led Zeppelin 2.
Yep.
But it ain't my favorite. We're about to, then we get into 3 and 4, and we're talking about a band that is clicking on every single cylinder. You get to Physical Graffiti. What a mishmash of cool shit there. I mean, and I can't wait to get to Presence because I really think that I cannot wait for you to go top to bottom on that one and see what in 2025 that album sounds like to you, because I've always had it, but it's really grown with me. And here's the thing as well with Zeppelin. There's other things that did not, I think, grow quite as well over time, and we'll talk about it. But I don't know. Do you have anything more to add about Led Zeppelin 1, one of the best debut albums of all time?
No, man. I think we pretty much hit on all the notes I expected us to. Jump through history, jump through some lore, some trivia, personal takeaways that I hope resonate with, a lot of listeners out there. I think there's fact and then there's your personal experience. And you can't state it enough with music, movies, and art, and just the scenery of life. But like this kind of stuff helps you paint the picture for, sometimes you're not the only one. And I think just both of us aligning on How Many More Times is probably a clear indication of that. I sort of held that like pridefully inside. That was like, I don't care. Like, this is what I love. This is my thing. So, you can argue all day that Dazed and Confused is the end all be all of Led Zeppelin in its entirety. And it's not even my number one. So, I think we hit it, man. I really enjoyed, breaking down that first album, and, look forward to the others that follow. And I'm with you, man. Like, me. There are some hitters coming up that are underlying. They would probably be on my funeral playlist. Let's just put it that way. That may or may not be on anybody's. So,
yeah, I think that the fact that you picked How Many More Times shows how unpredictable Spiciest Biscuit's going to be. I could have sworn you would have picked Baby I'm Gonna Leave You. I thought that was it. I thought that was the shoe-in, and you thought maybe because I'm the seasoned Zeppelin fan, I like Dazed and Confused. It's that mothership kind of song.
I do have to admit that my favorite line was Babe from Babe, I'm Gonna Leave You. You did throw out a teaser that your favorite line was from.
Yes.
How Many More Times, which in that moment I may, if we look back, play this back just a couple of tracks, you'll see my reaction, because I almost felt like I gave away how I felt about it and where it would be placed on my rankings. So it's funny.
If we were to, last thing here, we don't have an official title for how we're going to rank these albums, like instead of 1 out of 5 stars or, on a 10 scale. We'll eventually come up with an agreed upon unit of measurement. But out of 10, what are you giving this album? And here's the tricky thing. Are we going to do this in context of Led Zeppelin or of rock music as a whole?
Yeah.
Because I think that could actually change the...
It's tough. I think we wait on the Led Zeppelin ranking until we've made it through the mini-series, and we do a segment on ranking the albums in its entirety. And honestly, man, I'm kind of looking forward to that journey, because what I would answer now might be unfair to what I would answer after we've made it through them all with fresh listens top to bottom through everything. I'll tell you what, man, I'm really looking forward to waking up tomorrow and driving to get coffee and being able to queue up 2, because I've just been on this for so long. So like, this is almost like a Christmas
Eve going into Christmas Day.
I'm going to do the same because 2 is the sound of a band that is, this is the biggest band in the world. Like,
Yeah.
I mean, and the fact that happened was released 9 months after this. The thing is that it is a leap in some ways. In other ways, it is much a continuation of what you hear in Led Zeppelin 1. I think as we go through the series, though, we're going to continue to look back at Led Zeppelin 1. There's a rawness, there's an energy, there's this sort of manic, propulsive, just freaking like a bunch of young dudes playing their ass off that they did other times in their career. But man, there was just something crackles about Led Zeppelin 1 that other albums of theirs don't.
It's true, and I would love to give it a fair ranking, meaning I'm not looking at all the lore. I know little but not a lot in terms of the backstory of how and why they came together. Like, had no idea that Train Came a Rollin' was a seamless moment of lightning strike in this studio, and they knew they struck gold, and they went on and they wrote this album. If I went and bought this and went home, like I've said 4 times now on this podcast, lit my candle, closed my door, and put my cans on my ears and sat next to my bed and listened, I would walk away the next morning going to school exuberant and selling the album for sure to just about every one of my friends and peers that would want to listen to me. But I would probably rank the album at like a 7, solely because there's clear albums and clear artists at the time that would be hard to rank against. Meaning, like, if I'm giving this a 10, it's up there with like my Mount Rushmore of who I've got
Exactly
on my wall. You know, this is right off the bat, dude, and like we would be ranking right now from a place of we know what's coming and we can tell the future. I would give this a 7 because it's a journey. There's 22 minutes now that I know on each side of the album that are both cohesive straight through, but secular in their approach. And there's just enough of who Led Zeppelin will end up being beyond the blues and the other essences of what Led Zeppelin 1 is that you know you've got something else. So, like, what you want with a great series or a great movie, a great album, is the thought of what is coming. And I think that this album teed that up. So, like, I would be a 7, and I would probably want to rank it higher, but I would refuse to do so because, again, there would be posters around my wall of my heroes that I would say reluctantly, I don't know if these guys are up to that standard yet, but you would hope they would get there.
I will go with the solid 8, acknowledging that the songs, like I said in the hot take, the songs themselves are not necessarily these amazingly written pieces of art, but that the performances are so good. And I think also just heightening that ranking or rating a little bit just because of the impact that it had. So there's a little bit of, okay, the album by itself in a nutshell. For some reason, every time I say that, I think of Austin Powers. Oh, look, I'm in a nutshell. But I think it stands on its own musically and performance-wise. But because of what it did, I'll lift that 7 to 8 for myself. I will be as critical as I can through this series, and I think there will be a couple of Zeppelin albums where you will be surprised at how low I go. Compared to themselves, and really just in the general annals of rock history, trying to be fair and not give everything a 10. There is a Zeppelin album or two I will probably give a 10 out of 10, but I'm going to try to reserve that for, as you said, the Mount Rushmore kind of stuff. Fact remains, this is one of the best debut albums ever, one of the most impactful to be sure. And next up, we got Led Zeppelin II, which is a monster all of its own. The hits keep coming. Next week, Led Zeppelin II. I know my Spiciest Biscuit. I think I know my Dustiest Crumpet. But that is, if this is a seminal debut album, then Led Zeppelin II was sort of, oh, well, these guys are going to dominate for the next decade, and that's exactly what they did. So that's what we'll cover next week. Drop the Needleheads, Mike Carpenter, Schmiggy, Ben Yates, Yahtzee.
Yep.
We don't really call each other that, but it's nice to have those playful names. And we got the cool logo. We got the theme song underneath right now. Ben, we aren't hearing it, but they'll probably be hearing the outro theme fading in and taking us home. We made it damn near 3 hours on our inaugural podcast. That's pretty good.
Yeah, I love it, man. And, for the casual listener out there, do me a favor. Once we get all of our social medias aligned and YouTube feeds going and podcasts out there, give us a follow, give us a like, give us a listen, give us some feedback. Don't be too harsh, but harsh enough. And go give the album a listen, man. If you haven't listened to Led Zeppelin I in a long time, give it a spin. Shoot us a note. Give us your take.
Yeah, I think that's just it. This will, I hope, become a discussion where whatever album we're talking about that week, then on the YouTube feed or on whatever podcast platform you might be listening to, or our Twitter profile. We'll get all the socials out as we get those launched, which will be up by the time this podcast is finally available for public view, or public listen. But yeah, I do think that my goal is, one, we get to just talk music. That's number one. I mean, we could have 5 listeners a week. I'm okay with that.
Accomplished.
But 2, if it can open up a discussion revisiting either albums that you've listened to a bajillion times but haven't listened to for a few years, or maybe picking that obscure album from a well-known artist, because most of the artists, we aren't going to go too far off the beaten path, but when we get to In Through the Outdoor for Led Zeppelin, that's a weird album. That's going to be a very interesting discussion that I will be anxious to see what other people think about an album that is, I don't know, very, very different from the rest of their discography.
Sure. And this statement here would allude to the fact that we will get listeners. I think we will. I hope we do. It's a cool thing. But at the end of the day, man, if we do this week over week and we just get to talk music together, it's going to be therapeutic enough for me that it will be a win. That said, though, I would love nothing more than to hear from, a Johnny Poo Poo Pants that, man, he hasn't listened to how many more times in 20 years, and he revisited it because he listened. And, he has the same sentiments we do as it being his spiciest biscuit. Man, I feel like that ranking system could just take flight with just about anybody if you dig music and you dig albums and you call yourself a connoisseur. I mean, you sit back, you let a record play, and again, I've said it over and over during this podcast, but if something moves you, there's a strong likelihood that you're probably not the only person that it's moved. So hearing from like-minded individuals and unlike-minded individuals that, a track was powerful enough to you that it rose to the top amongst clear powerhouse greatest hits from a band like Led Zeppelin means something. And I think we'll get to a lot of that as we maneuver through these mini-series, not only Led Zeppelin, but others, man. And I know Mike and I already have a laundry list of bands we're going to get to and albums that we're going to cover. So depending upon how we lay all this out, we may do precursor teasers of what's coming next and things like that. But I'm really looking forward to this. Big shout out to co-host and best friend here, Mike Carpenter. I know we've been toying with this idea also for a long time, and to do this right now feels like we were on a drive to Alpine Valley.
Yeah, which basically this is the length of that drive. So
I thought of made constructive motion out of that, and now we're pulling up to Staybridge Suites, and we're about to check in. All day. So, but man, that was chicken soup for the soul, as we say, and makes me elated for what's to come. And thanks for sticking with us through that, because I think we're going to get a little bit more dialed into the approach here. But that was wholeheartedly stab number 1 at season 1, episode 1 of Drop the Needleheads.
Next week, Led Zeppelin II, from the raw power of their debut album to the stadium rock polish of their second, which came just 9 months after their debut. Led Zeppelin 2 was just one of those that, just like Led Zeppelin 1's been discussed a bunch, but we're going to try to give our own spin on it as well. We appreciate you tuning in to Drop the Needleheads, our inaugural episode, hopefully the first of many, many episodes. And this Led Zeppelin mini-series, The Pod Remains the Cast, will continue with Led Zeppelin II, followed by 3, 4, Houses of the Holy, Physical Graffiti, all the way down to Coda, maybe, and all the extra unreleased tracks that were found in the box sets in the 90s and beyond. Maybe, Ben, we'll even do the live albums as a bonus episode or something like that. But as we work our way through this podcast, we appreciate you guys tuning in and giving your feedback on our socials, which we will get that information out when we have that stuff more established. But subscribe to us wherever you listen to your podcast, whether that be YouTube, Apple Podcast, Spotify, you name it, we are there. And as we talk about it, we'd love you to listen and respond, not just to the podcast, but to the albums we're responding to ourselves. We will see you next week for Led Zeppelin II. For myself, Mike Carpenter, and Ben Yates.
Signing off, the record spin, the bourbon flows.
And for this series, the pod remains the cast. The takes will be as deep as John Bonham's bass drum. This is Drop the Needleheads.